And whatever whatever the agenda that you set is going to be quite dynamic, and we have to adapt to this idea of just in time, just enough agility, and that is a change in the way education works. You know, we talk about teachable moments, but I think
Yeah.
you live in open inquiry, you live in adaptive agility, and it's co-creative. It's a beautiful space, and but it's a different habit than planners and even engineers when they want to put something out there. My innovation team was Jesse Ehrenfeld, who's the past president of American Medical Association, just posted in LinkedIn that innovation is great, but at some point you need validation, you need safety checks, especially if you're doing risk and high visibility things like healthcare. And I think your stewardship of the educational asset and skill set is just that. It is looking not to be pioneering and radical, but to be really effective and evolutionary. So yeah, I wouldn't change anything. I would just have the students step up to their highest potential and adapt.
Well, that's what they're going to have to do. The question really, the biggest question in my mind, and again, I think of my grandchildren, is 10 years from now, what's their life going to be like? What are the things that are going to be important? But most important for us is how do we help them transition to that? The world doesn't necessarily transition to where we want it to go on its own. We see that with things that are happening in the world right now. Um, and where that where that might be taking us. It's and now if I think here of you take the political, because in the end of the day, the political drives most of life. And when you take that political and you put the power that AI and robotics is going to put on top of that, that's a really, really scary thought.
Well, it doesn't have to be scary. I look at politics with the lens of its original definition as possibilities. And I think humanity, every generation has that choice. It's a moral choice. If you define success in terms of monetary, competitive, and how much can I hoard in this lifetime for my generation and for my children, you will ultimately have this conflict of visions that Thomas Sowell talks about, where it's either a zero-sum game or it's a not a game but an adventure in abundance. And you know, a growth mindset with forgiveness, with radical curiosity of a scientific approach, not to bias and gamify, but to really understand what it is to be fully human, to be sustainable, and as the indigenous wisdom talks about, 7 generations in our decision making. And so that's my idealism. I'm old enough that I choose peace as my final target 10 years from now. And if I can continue to stay resting in peace because I've made moral advances that breath by breath and day by day makes a little bit of remembrance and gratitude, I think that's a good life. But
Mhm.
that's not what everybody else wants. And I certainly see the consequences with my patients and even our family dynamics of when ego and passion and pursuit of polarities becomes divisive as opposed to unifying. And I love our Rotary family because it allows the four-way test to really be embedded in our culture. And if we can make everyone's Rotarian hearts ignite and move the magic and create a lasting impact, I think we've done a good job.
Yeah. No, if we can do that, the issue we think just peace. How many hundreds of thousands or now millions of people have been killed by conflict in just the last 5 or 6 years? Um, and
Yeah,
and
we're getting really good with weaponization
yeah.
and unfortunately tokenization, where the human being as a dignified individual whole person is gamified, and it's okay. You just hit the reset button and try somebody else. So yeah, that's this is uh Promethean moment, as some of the New York Times, Thomas Friedman and others would say. And I would say we need these radical countermeasures to global security, to education, all not in the um, intensification of a competitive environment, but how, like you said, how do we create a common ground where everyone's got a shared commitment to the same vision of inner peace and harmonious leadership.
Mhm.
And I think that it doesn't need to be binary. Actually, it's better as a quantum processor and as a brain to think about this in terms of possibilities and probabilities. And
Mhm.
in our quantum coherence theory of business innovation, not mine, but as I've read, the three factors are, and they're being magnified and used by various large companies. Coherence, what does it mean to be coherent across a large group? And collaborative learning platforms can help us understand what that shared middle ground looks like. Um, so coherence, the idea of entanglement, which means engagement, not just detached witness observers and external consultants, but actually in the field of this messy ground. The messy middle, as our safety officers would call it. So coherence, entanglement, and then the third property is timing. And you hit it with your first question about, well, when do I open the door to the agenda for today?
Yeah.
And I would propose you're doing a great job. At least we know we can log in and join you
Mhm.
at this
Mhm.
time. That's
Mhm.
predictable. What we get out of it is, I think, everybody's effort and everybody's agenda. And it's kaleidoscopic in the middle of this vector space of singularity and superpositioning.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that means we can let everybody into this conversation,
Mhm.
and everyone will take away a different meaning and
Yeah.
perspective. And as long as it's, I think, participatory, and I would dare to use the word democratic, um, we will have a blossoming of a
Mhm.
lotus
Mhm.
flower
Mhm.
in a very tranquil and understandable way,
Yeah.
which doesn't mean we're all detached and just living monks on the mountain, but
Yeah.
we're actually in walking meditation with each other as a murmuration, and that is
Yeah.
our
Yeah.
species.
Okay, well let me get this show on the road. We are recording it. I'm a little disappointed. I thought here the idea of discussing millions of dollars would be more interesting to people. But I hope I didn't get things wrong on the time because I was thinking to myself, wait a minute, it's been 2 weeks since we changed the clocks. I'm always struggling here with, well, okay, when does the rest of the world change? Because it's the whole world used to change at the same time, but now we moved ours up a couple of years ago, and so I'm always struggling. So I know I originally copied from a month ago. So I would get to Europe the 6 hour difference. And then I realized, well, wait a minute, no, they don't change until next week. So then I had to put it back. I'm hoping I had it right. Anyway, but we're recording it. So, if they don't, if they're not here with the beginning, they'll be able to watch it later on. Okay, ding. I'm Bill Graham. I'm the president of the Rotary Dare to Be Great Global eClub. And I declare this meeting on 21 March 2026 to be open. The Dare to Be Great Global eClub is the go-to place for those who are crazy enough to think they can change the world, the whole world, and daring enough to try. Our topic for today, the last few weeks, we talked about the problems of education worldwide. We know that since COVID, there's been a dramatic decline in literacy worldwide. As actually, there's a 30% increase in the number of 10-year-olds worldwide that are unable to read functionally. And uh, the situation has not gotten significantly better since COVID is behind us. In fact, in 2024 in the United States, they had the NAEP exam, which is considered the national report card, and they reported the highest number of 10-year-olds, fourth graders in the United States that cannot read functionally since they've been keeping records. It's more than 40%. That means we're somewhere between one out of every it's one out of every two and a half children, 10-year-olds, fourth graders in the United States that cannot read effectively. And it's interesting to note in that same year, I think it was the same year, that in Germany, the newspapers around April, May timeframe were full of the fact that testing in Germany had discovered that one out of every four fourth graders is not able to read effectively. So we see this huge problem with literacy that has not been getting better. And we look though and see back a while ago, I was teaching at Purdue University, and I decided that university was too late to really make the kind of difference that I was hoping to make in education. So for 3 years, I traveled around a lot of the United States, Missouri, Texas, Georgia, the whole Northeast, from Washington, D.C. to the Canadian border. And I spoke to the better part of 1,000 educators and many thousands of students trying to understand what the problem was even back then. And I was really surprised to see that in almost every single school that I visited, they had some kind of an extra initiative going on to improve the educational results. And education is a huge business. The number of companies and foundations and think tanks that are focused on improving education is huge. Yet for all that effort, we're not seeing any results because we're seeing, as I noted, 40% of fourth graders cannot read effectively in the United States. It's mind-boggling. How can that be? We're a country where education is mandatory. Everybody has to go to school or be effectively homeschooled. So how can we have those kind of results? So the issue here is that we said, wait a minute, let's back off. Let's take a look. What's being done to try to improve education outcomes? And why is it not succeeding? And what we found was that almost all efforts, are focused on the teaching, that somehow education and teaching have become synonymous, more so than education and learning. And what we saw with that is the effort to say that when we look and see common wisdom, if you just do a general search anywhere and say, what are the causes of the education disparities in the United States? The primary ones are teachers and funding. Yet we found, well, first of all, I do have to say, in the United States, the disparity is not so much between individuals. It's primarily between schools. In other words, when we look at high performing schools, the range of students between the best performing and the least performing is not that far apart. Pretty much they're all at the top level. In other words, the average percentage of students at grade level, for example, in one state, the top 10% of primary schools, we found that it was over 90% of students were at grade level. When we looked and asked the same question of the bottom 10% of primary schools, we found that the percentage of students at grade level was usually less than 10%. So it's not so much a question of the individual student as it is the school. So this makes it easy for politicians and others to say, well, it must be the funding or it must be the teachers. Because in the United States, funding is community based. And so every community might have different amounts. But we did find that most states have additional funding to try to balance out between wealthy communities and disadvantaged communities. And what we found was looking at that state was that the worst achieving school in the state actually spends 40% more per student than the highest achieving school. The other thing we found was that there are programs in the United States to try to encourage teachers, get better teachers into the low achieving schools. And because of those programs, that some of the lowest achieving schools had the best prepared and most dedicated teachers. And so if we take out those, we say, well, what's the problem? Well, there was a large scale study done, funded by the Bloomberg Foundation in Providence, Rhode Island, nicknamed Providence Talks. And what they did is they tracked children from early childhood, from basically birth, just trying to understand what do these children experience in the first years of life? We know that the brain evolves the fastest during the first 3 years of life, and then the next couple of years is the second biggest push. And what they found was that children of the lowest socioeconomic categories, the working and welfare class families, children heard up to 30 million fewer words by the time they're 3 years old. And that at the time they began school, children from those disadvantaged backgrounds were up to 2 years behind in mental maturity and verbal vocabulary skills. That includes socialization, uh, being able to self-control, behave themselves, and so forth. So the if we think about it, that we have schools that are neighborhood based, therefore we tend, and because neighborhoods tend to be segregated by the wealth or income of the residents, we take all the kids that up to 2 years behind, we put them into one school. And on the other end of the extreme, we have kids that have been attending very expensive preschools, top quality preschools for years, and they could be up to 2 years ahead of the basic when they start school. So we've got up to a 4 year gap when they start school between the children in the lowest achieving schools and the highest achieving schools. But then, because we're a country that believes in equality, we say, hey, every student has to be treated the same. So we totally ignore, well, where did you come from? And say, okay, grade one, this is what you've got to teach. This is what they're supposed to learn by the end of grade one. And grade two, the same, and so on. But if you're starting off with children with up to a 4-year difference in their readiness to learn, that is a totally unrealistic expectation. A little mind game we played is we said, okay, let's imagine we're going to go to uh, uh, teachers, seventh grade math teachers. We'll take them as an example. Now, let's say here that we were to go in a top achieving school in a wealthy school district and ask a seventh grade math teacher, would you be willing to pledge to get 100% of your students to be at grade level by the end of the school year? And almost all those teachers are going to say, well, that's what I do already. What do you mean? No problem. But if you go down and ask in one of the lowest achieving schools in the state, that seventh grade math teacher, the same question, you're likely to hear, are you crazy? Yeah, that teacher in that high achieving school can promise that because 90% of their students start the year grade level ready. 90% of my students are 2, 3, 4, or more years behind when we start the school year. It's unfair that you even ask me to be measured by the same standard or to achieve the same result when I'm starting with such a different category of students to begin with. So we then say, well, what if we could guarantee you that all the students coming into your class next year would all be grade level ready? And then we believe every one of those teachers are going to say, sure, no problem. I'll get them all to be at grade level at the end of the year if I have students that are ready and prepared to be able to learn the material of this grade. So at any rate, the one of the big issues that we discovered was that students are starting at such different places. And that's a problem that has to be addressed separately because the schools can't do much about the fact of a student coming in 4 years behind the students in the highest level. The other thing here that we have to recognize is that students in lower income neighborhoods have a much higher degree of absenteeism. And so we've got a teacher that might be looking out at his class and saying, a third of that class did not get the preparatory lecture to today's class, to today's lesson. They missed the lesson that was a prerequisite to understand today's lesson. And what am I going to do about that? Another factor is transient in lower socioeconomic neighborhoods. People move around a lot more. Housing is very insecure, and as a result, a teacher has a lot of students in the class that weren't there a month ago or 2 months ago. Especially if we take a look, a city like New York City, where I think it's now up to 15% of the entire public school population is homeless. And so I don't know if it's still the case, but my understanding was that a number of the shelters, now keep in mind, when we say homeless, that doesn't mean everybody's living on the street or in a shelter. A lot of them are couch surfing with neighbors or relatives or whatnot, but they tend to be able to only stay a certain amount of time with that relative, and then you got to move to another relative, which might be in another school area. But even if they're in shelters, I understand it used to be a policy you can only stay in a shelter a certain amount of time. And so people would have to go to another shelter, which again might be in a different school zone. So, or as they're getting used to where is my kid got to go to school, that's where there's a number of absentee days because they're trying to figure out what's going on here. And we have to keep in mind that many of those lower socioeconomic families that are in these tough situations are struggling just with the day-to-day survival situation on their own. So they don't necessarily have the time and the inner peace, if you would, to be able to think about, oh, my child needs this for education. They're thinking about what does my child need to survive in terms of food or in terms of housing and so forth. Anyway, the bottom line is we see that part of the problem, a major part of the problem is ensuring that regardless of what family situation a student comes from, that should not impact that student's opportunities for future life. The second major thing that we had to realize, and it has something to do with that degree of preparation, or the degree of home support that a student has, is students learn differently. Some students here just, boy, they can grasp stuff very quickly. Some here they need visual aids to help them understand things. Others are fine just hearing it verbally. But the bottom line is they learn at different speeds. But our school systems, pretty much around the whole world, are calendar based. Somebody set a curriculum that says, hey, if it's Tuesday, you got to be teaching fractions, and ready or not. And so those students that are not ready, well, tough luck. You know, we're just going to measure where you're at and pass you on. It's not like here there's a requirement that you've got to know the stuff. And because pretty much all of our learning builds on prior learning. And if you didn't get the prior learning, you have a very small chance that you're going to get the new knowledge that builds on that. So this factor of um, treating everybody the same, assuming everybody's learning at the same pace, assuming nobody missed a day of school and has a hole in something that's a prerequisite for something that's coming down the road. As somebody said, a 70, which I think in 70 to 80, something like that, percent correct is a C. And for most people, oh, see, that's good enough. But that means you got 20 to 30% that you didn't understand. And now you come to the next level and it tries to build on anything that's in that 20, 30% that you didn't understand. And your chances are minimal that you're going to be able to succeed. And that compounds and compounds and compounds. One of the things I observed as I was traveling around the country in the United States was that by fifth grade, somewhere between fourth and fifth grade, uh, that compounded knowledge gap um, uh, becomes almost fatal. You're not going to recover. The chances that you're going to recover from that are minimal at that point without some very special and very expensive intervention, which almost no school district is able to provide. Anyway, so we went into this in depth in the last few meetings about these causes, both in terms of readiness and in terms of this cadre-based, calendar-based education system that assumes everybody is going to learn everything at the same speed, and therefore everybody is going to be at the same place when we complete the education process. Related to this difference, because we see that the difference in readiness in those first 5 years of life is primarily a function of the socioeconomic background. There's a huge correlation between the education level and the economic level of the family and the degree of readiness a student has when they reach school. But that gap doesn't, that home influence doesn't end there. We don't say now they're in school, now we're going to keep everybody at the same pace because uh, children spend only about 20% of their waking hours in the classroom, which means what's happening in the other 80% of their waking hours. Well, if you're in the highest socioeconomic category, you might have a governess, you might have tutors, you've got a family that is uh, uh, very encouraging that you're going to be a striver. You've got to strive to achieve the level of success that your family is used to. And that doesn't exist in a lot of the lower socioeconomic families. So as a result, this gap of enrichment, further enrichment and support that we see in the higher socioeconomic categories parallel to school during the first 4 or 5 grades or school years, that does not exist in the lower socioeconomic categories. And this is particularly visible with what they call the summer slide. In other words, if you're in that top 10% of schools or the socioeconomic background, you continue to have enriching experiences throughout the summer, and you have almost no loss of what you learned up until then. But if you're in a bottom socioeconomic category and there's no enrichment and so forth, the summer slide loss is very, very significant. So we see here that what's happening outside of school has probably a greater influence. In fact, almost all the studies show has a greater influence on your academic success than what's happening in schools. At the same time here, there's there's many people have said, well, okay, we have to treat this holistically. We have to go out and fix the family. Well, we're really saying we got to go out and fix the economy. We got to go and make everybody equal. But then nobody's willing to go and say, let's do that. Or the people who are well intentioned but have no means to be able to accomplish that. So almost every effort to try to take a holistic approach to say, let's fix the family so that that will fix the readiness and will fix the support during the early years of school. They've almost all failed. I'm not aware of any project at scale that has succeeded in fixing the family. There's many anecdotal stories. Trenton, New Jersey, there's a program that the Quakers implemented there for holistic family, and they had some success with some percentage of families, but not a significant percent. So the issue is here, is there something about what we do in school, the way we do school that can change that? So any rate, so the problem, we're aware it's a big problem. That problem affects, we know the difference in incomes. We know the crime rates here. There's the famous story out of California where they project what kind of prison capacity they will need in California based on third grade test results. And the so we see education is very, very significant for future success. And we know that the education outcomes are so heavily resultant in poverty, but we don't have any plans. I don't know if any of you are aware of anybody that says, I've got a plan and we're going to close the education gap. We'll do this. We can get this done in X number of years. If that's the case, I don't know what's happened in the last 40, 50 years, why we didn't do any of that. But the bottom line is when we look at the results, the results tell us we have not succeeded in any kind of a measure to close the education gaps. And like I said, this most recent national NAEP exam, the nation's report card for the USA, shows we have the worst performance, education performance today since we began measuring the results. And for when we look internationally, the it looks very different because very often internationally, the issue is access to schools, access to education. In the United States, it's mandatory. You got to go to school. In Germany and Europe, you have to go to school. But they're still having these poor results. In a lot of developing countries, they have the problem as having access, getting access to education and schools at all. But even where they do have access, one of the problems is that the dropout rate is extremely high. And part of that reason gets back to this early child preparation. We have to remember there's almost 6,000 languages spoken in the world. There's only a couple of hundred school languages. So this means that in many, many countries, children are starting school uh, in a language other than what they've spoken so far in their lives. And so that's like the verbal vocabulary situation that we see in poor communities in developed countries. So the solution here, if we, oh, and then the problem is that child who goes and starts school in a developing country who does not have the proper preparation. They don't have the home encouragement. They've got huge distances to overcome to even get to the school. They've got language issues because until now, their mother tongue is not whatever is being spoken in that school. And the result is their first few years in school, they're considered they think I'm a failure. I don't get this. I don't understand this. And that's what leads to a lot of the dropout rate here. This school's not paying off. I'm not getting anywhere. So I'm going to leave. Now, I'm not talking about the top 10%. You can go into the worst schools in the United States, and you will find that there is a percentage of the students, maybe 10, maybe 15%, they'll succeed. I don't care what kind of a problem you toss in front of them, how difficult their lives in. They just got whatever and they're going to succeed. But that's not our issue as a society. It's not what the top 10, 15% are doing. Japan, I think they take the attitude of how are we doing with the bottom 10%? Okay. In other words, let's keep raising up that bottom 10% and the whole society benefits. We sort of have a situation in developed countries. It's a race. Let's help the top to do even better. So we've got all kinds of programs for the gifted and talented and things like this. And we would prefer to put our resources into helping the top few percent compete more than to helping close the gap between the bottom percents and the top. Okay. So enough talk about the problems. I think we all get it. The last session, or the last couple of sessions, we spoke about solution ideas. And part of the problem, we see a country like Finland, about maybe 20 years ago now, maybe 25, they implemented a program to try to close the education gap. And a big part of the program was to provide early childhood preschool, starting as young as 6 months of age. Okay, I've heard in the meantime it might be 9 months now, but somewhere before age one. And they did that with student-teacher ratios of 1 to 3 or 1 to 4. And those teachers had to be really very, very highly qualified in child psychology and so forth. Now, they didn't go and say, we're going to take a whole bunch of 9-month-old children and sit them in desks in a classroom and we'll teach them. But what they did is they just said they just acted to do what really good parents would do, and that is to just go and talk and explain to those children. So even if a child of 6 or 9 months of age can't speak yet or can't understand formal language, speaking to them it helps their brains evolve and develop. And so that's what they did. If a child goes and goes, and points to a ball, they might respond of, oh, yes, that's a big red ball. And just those kinds of what they call serve and return really made a difference. And what did we see happen as a result of this? Finland, which was middle of the road in education systems among developed countries, they jumped way to the top of all developed countries in education outcome. Now, that wasn't the only thing they did. They also improved the quality of teachers at all levels of school and so forth. But I feel that the biggest impact was because of putting in this preschool starting at such a young age. Now, uh, that is very expensive because they subsidized. If you, it didn't make any difference if you were poor, your child's attendance in the preschool was subsidized. If you had money, then you were expected to pay for that preschool. But the bottom line was to get everybody into the preschool program, or the great majority. And they succeeded in doing that, and that's a big part of what resulted in them jumping so high in performance outcomes. Um, we could say, okay, let's do that here in other countries or in the United States. Well, the difference is in Finland, the poverty rate was, I don't know, maybe 5%, maybe 10%. So the cost of subsidizing for poor families was very low. And the percentage of families that did not have that supportive home life was very low. In the United States, it's very high and getting higher and higher. In 2001, there were 4 states in the United States where more than 50% of public school students uh, qualified for a free or subsidized lunch, which is very often used as an indicator for poverty. By 2011, just 10 years later, that number had more than quadrupled to 17 states with more than 50% of students qualifying for a free or subsidized lunch. By 2014, that had increased to 22 states. I don't know since then, but I would suspect we're somewheres in the 30s in terms of numbers of states where more than 50% of public school children qualify for a free or subsidized lunch. But right now, on a national level, the United States is considered that more than 50% of all public school children in the United States live in some degree of poverty. Okay. So we see the poverty rate going up at the same time. Now, I mentioned here I mentioned here the results of the studies that show that has that big impact on early childhood development. Literally the brains. In the first 3 years, your brain is establishing all kinds of connections inside your head based on all of the uh, external inputs, all the experiences and the understanding and the language that you're hearing and so forth. If you don't have that, your brain doesn't create all those connections. And by the time you reach kindergarten or the first school years, your brain could be significantly underdeveloped compared to children that have had all of that enriching interaction in their early years. And there are studies that show even if I put you in the school environment, I teach you to read and so forth, that children who did not have that early childhood enriched experience, they never can read as fast. They can read, but they read at a much slower pace. So they're everything that builds on that the rest of their lives is put into a disadvantaged situation. There's also other studies that show in the early 2000s, the United States, the politicians in the United States were very upset that the PISA exam, that's the OECD exam that compares the education outcomes of different countries was showing that the United States was like in the 30s in math and reading, math and science, a little better in math and science, but horrible in reading. And the politicians, at the time I was somewhat active down in Washington, and the politicians were screaming, "It's the educators, it's the teachers. So we don't have good teachers in this country. We got to do something to improve the quality of teachers." And the National Association of Secondary School Principals was very upset that the education community was bearing all the blame on this. So they did a study and they took the PISA results of schools and they correlated that to the percentage of students in schools that qualified for a free or subsidized lunch. And it was very interesting what they discovered. They discovered that if you only took schools that had less than 10% of low-income students, only 10% of students that qualified for a free or subsidized lunch or fewer, that the United States tied the best country in the world for education outcomes. But they found if you took schools that had more than, I think it was 40 or 50% of students that qualified for a free or subsidized lunch, the United States scored at the level of a developing third world country. So they were able to correlate the poverty and the results based on the percentage of students in a school. Because again, we consolidate all the low income students in one school because they're neighborhood schools and all the wealthier kids in other schools. And it comes out that the correlation is a perfect X. And so they reported on those results. And there's been other studies in the meantime that showed similar results. Okay. So at any rate, we discussed uh, what are the things that we could do that could change that situation. As I mentioned, almost all the efforts of decades, many decades, to improve education have all been focused on curriculum, on teachers, on what I call the supply side of education. There's almost no efforts going into what I call the demand side of education. In other words, we sit a bunch of students here and we put a teacher in the front and say, you sprinkle some knowledge over all those students, and that's what education's all about. But we know that that doesn't work. We know students don't learn at the same pace. We know some students are optically influenced and other students are audibly influenced and so forth. And some require hands-on and others not. And a teacher sitting there and saying, but I've got 25 students in front of me here. What do you expect me to do? If I can only target, I'm only giving one lecture. So who do I target? And if I'm in a low-income school where the class has students that vary by up to 4 years of readiness for my class, uh, what do I do? So that's why it's unfair that you ask me, the teacher, to fix this problem. And we end up with somewhere they have a cartoon showing we got the politicians and some parent groups are pointing the finger at the educators and saying, hey, if you would fix the education system, then that's going to solve our social problems in our country. And you've got the educators pointing their fingers at the politicians and saying, if you solve the social problems in the country, then we can go and fix the education problems. So we've got this finger pointing, but nothing is moving. And when we go and look and say, okay, hey, we've had this problem for so long. Who's got a plan? Who's got a believable plan that we believe is going to be able to fix the problem? I can't find any. I can't find any official body that says if we do this, or not if we do, but here is the timetable that we are going to do this, and we are going to solve the problem. We have an example in the United States they're calling the Mississippi Miracle. Mississippi, for decades, was always the 49th or 50th in the United States in terms of education outcomes. In 2013, they made a change to the education policy in the state, and that jumped them into the top 10% of schools within less than 10 years. What they did is they just said, okay, well, we know the main test is done in fourth grade. So guess what? If you're not fourth grade ready, we're just not going to promote you to the fourth grade. That was their answer. So the fourth grade test doesn't include any more of those kids that didn't make it out of third grade. But to be fair, they went and they put in tutors and special programs to try to help those third graders improve. But the result is when we look at the long term, because they had achieved that result, I think it was 2013, they implemented the new policy. By 2019, they were already in the top 10. But when we look here at the comparative results, long term in Mississippi, they don't it doesn't hold up. And this is because there's a big shift between the third and the fourth grade in education systems. Up through the third grade, anything to do with literacy, it's based on learning to read. We're going to teach you how to be an effective reader. And that, for most people, means able to decode letters into words. Fourth grade onward is reading to learn. So the assumption is, hey, you can read. So therefore, you can use this now as the vehicle to help you learn everything else. But reading is not the ability to decode. You can tell me how to decode letters into words, and I can sit there and read out loud a newspaper to you. It doesn't mean I understood one word of what I said. So the issue is really understanding vocabulary. Well, that vocabulary, the roots of that vocabulary, the basis was built in those first 5 years before you ever set foot in the classroom. And those kids that didn't get that, when they have to now switch, they manage to learn to decode because that's very simple and mechanical. But when they're now expected to understand what they're reading to be able to absorb that knowledge, it's like going off a cliff for them. They don't have the vocabulary to build on to be able to understand what they're reading. So it shows us we have to fix two problems. One problem is that we have to fix is we've got to prepare students to be equally able to have the mental maturity, the motor skills, the self-control, and especially the verbal vocabulary when they hit school age. We can't say, oh, that's the problem of every individual parent. If the parent didn't do the job, that's their problem. No, when that kid hits the school, and when you've got 90% of the kids hitting a school whose parents didn't do that, the parents who did, their kids don't have any chance because the school can't say, oh, okay, well, you 10%, you were going to give you one education program and the other 90% we're going to do something else with. So the peer influence drags the successful students down in those schools. Whereas in the top schools, it works just the other way. The peer influence pulls the kids that are lower performing up. And that's something that has to be equalized. So we talked about, does anybody want to make any comments here? I'm talking too much. Does anybody want to make any comments about the state of education? And keep in mind, as I said, we are talking about the United States. I also did a lot of the studies in Europe. My grandchildren go to school in Europe. My sister lives in Europe. My son lives in Europe. So I studied a number of the European education systems as well as the US education systems. And I've also, a personal curiosity, spent time studying the Chinese education system and also the education system in a country like Vietnam. So that at any rate, when we look here at some of the developing countries, especially in Africa, where we have the distances to overcome, where we've got the fact that you're living in a remote village where there might not even be a single book in your entire community. Uh, uh, the early childhood development is based on your environment and your surrounding. You're never exposed to these ideas of what you could be. I ran into this, believe it or not, in Germany, looking at some of the remote areas in Germany. And Germany has an apprenticeship system, and they got a three-tier system. So, starting at grade 5, they already split apart those children that are likely to go on to advanced learning or university, and those students that are likely to become office workers, and those students that are likely to become laborers. And so if you're in a remote area, most of the kids go to a school to become a laborer. And if you're there, you're never exposed to the idea that you might become an architect or that you might be able to become a doctor, because that you don't have anybody around you that fits that category. So what should get you to be imagining what that life could be like? And it's even a bigger problem when we take a look into the developing countries. If you're in a very remote area, you only know how the people live where you're at. And so this is many of the same problems that we see in preparing a child for later in life happens there. And I think I've related the story of a doctor. She's the head of the endocrinology, I think, or oncology in a major university teaching hospital. And she grew up in central India and in a remote village in central India. She has, I think, there's 6 children that were in the family. But her father never exceeded fourth grade, and her mother never exceeded third grade. But her grandfather was a traveling judge that had to walk from village to village and adjudicate cases, and he was blind. So this doctor's mother was pulled out of school in third grade to guide her grandfather from village to village, and would sit there listening to him adjudicate all these. And she got an incredible education from that exposure. And she came back really valuing the idea of education. And she insisted that she wanted her children to have an education. Her husband, on the other hand, said, I don't want my children to get an education because in our village, there's no opportunity for children with an education. So they will leave our village. We're going to lose our children if they get educated. And so he forbid that any of his children could attend school. But he was a very hard worker, a good provider, and he worked long hours. And when he was at work, his wife snuck the kids into school. And the result of that was that they got an education. And he didn't notice that for years until the oldest boy finished the grade where his next level, he would have to go to the next bigger village to be able to continue school. And that's where he became aware. And that's where things got difficult. And he forced his wife to take all the kids out of school. And she, though, was so determined that she took the kids and left them. Now, imagine in a remote village in a developing country, a wife taking the children away from her husband, unheard of. But she did it. And he then realized how serious she was. And he begged her to come back and said, okay, if you come back, the kids can go to school. The kids went to school. They were all successful. All of the kids became engineers, scientists, doctors, and they all left the village. and many of them in the United States and Canada. So, on the one hand, his prophecy of it's going to destroy our family came true. On the other hand, the kids all had an opportunity to become the best they could be. But this is a challenge in many of these areas for these kids. And if you toss on top of that the fact that so many of these children are growing up speaking a language that is different from the language in school, and then they fail and they drop out. So we have to look and say the situation is similar in developing countries as it is in the developed countries, even though a lot of the conditions are different. Okay, so Ashok, you had your hands up. I'm sorry to hear that. I just want to sort of close that sequence there.
No, it's a beautiful way to close. So thank you so much for hosting this session, and I've been listening with deep connectivity to and resonance to all the last hour's commentary. And I really am grateful for the logic and the systemic nature of the description of the challenge for educators and education. So I just wanted to circle back. I'm really appreciative of the other six people on this call. They're, in my opinion, humble opinion, they're all geniuses, and you have an extraordinarily talented and compassionate ecosystem right here that's global. And to anchor how we move forward uh, comes maybe back to your analysis and your assumption about what it means to be great and what it means to dare. So if I just, while I was listening over the past hour, I also um, I use a high-speed parallel process where you pinged something in my brain. I went to my website, other, search engine, and I put a link in and then logically connected what I was thinking about as you were activating different aspects of the complex syndrome that we have in education. And so I wanted to frame the next few comments from the lens of public health and my journey to age 63 and a half of being a doctor at Mayo Clinic which is now considered number one hospital in the world. And I was born the first of four children in Africa to parents who were not in the medical field. I was the first doctor in our family. And it did take moving to Canada. It took courage. It took risk. It took cultural clashes. And it took prejudice reduction with all sorts of trauma healing that you could wrap yourself around and get into political conflicts with. But I'm just going to say that what you mentioned before, that story with the woman and how that education family survived was because of the focus on education and learning, but not just learning for the sake of becoming an Einstein or whatever, but being able to apply in a relevant, adaptive, and agile way the learning to the situation that was confronting them. And I think the supply demand question that you brought up is nicely linked to why. Like, why do you want to learn whatever it is you want to learn? And then how do you want to ask the question? And who do you want to engage in that exchange of, I'll call it wisdom with compassion? And what I've experienced over the last 6 months, being part of your virtual team, Bill, is un your unswerving and steadfast commitment to answering this question: what is the root cause of educational gaps? and how can we as individuals in our I'll say fishes in a big ocean, connect the dots and make a tiny shift. Um, so I won't philosophize anymore or give you more conceptual um, conundrums because I put most of those links in the chat. But I'll call out two stories that maybe will shift our paradigm or offer more hope from the lens of my local community in Rochester, Minnesota. So the first is several years ago, we created and Rotary created a Cradle to Career group that addressed what and measured what were the educational needs and gaps from K to undergraduate. And in the last 10 years, with daily and annual reports, I put one of the summits in there in the chat, we have shifted. We have made progress with the ecosystem, with developing a nonprofit status, and so on. The second solution is what I've been doing with Mayo Clinic and my busy clinical practice, which is exponentially complexified with AI and with the branding of the types of patients that we have to solve problems for. And I'll stay um, uh, uh, supporting the student because I think I had to shift from being a technical advisor and an expert in something to understanding my vulnerability as an imposter, not knowing the answers to all these genomic syndromes, rare problems, and things that we're supposed to have patients solve the problem for. So the answer in Mayo's model, for example, is teamwork. And you have a gifted team here that can work together, but we have to find a more dynamic strategy for collaborative learning, asynchronous learning, virtual and in-person learning, and then what do each of us want in terms of role clarification, task sequencing, and the story we want to share through you, Bill, as part of this Rotary movement. It is so complex and so the content that we have to understand and engage people is moving so quickly. My hope lies in the fact that we can put guardrails around the ethical leadership that's required for validation and then coming back with transparency to each of our um, advisors and local uh, politicians, so to speak, to say, hey, these are the people that in our community that aren't getting met yet. And it's not about being number one. It's about how do we have access to the best knowledge to help a person no matter where it is in the world. And I think we can do that with crowdsourcing. Um, the way we're applying it for Mayo, for example, is in business innovation. We have access to quantum computing experts, so you can build a quantum technology and a strategic positioning for when you want to roll that out. We work with aerospace and NASA and all those private sectors that are now having to come up with what are the international space regulations and laws. And of all of that, I think as I watch Stella and Eugene and others on the call, we struggle with just the basics. We don't have time to think and pray and eat and change the world while not getting burnt out or losing ourselves. So as a lung doctor, every day I breathe and I come back to trying to center when I'm thinking too fast or getting too ruffled with things. Come back to each breath, staying grounded in myself, really putting the principles of peace education as foundational to can I listen to through all this last hour that you talked about and resonate with the truth that wants to emerge.
Mhm.
And that is such a gift you have, Bill. You are so in flow with ethics and the four-way test. It doesn't even come to you. I know you so well. It doesn't come to you that you have to be a Rotarian first. And what does it mean to harmonize and align with truth when we are having all this misinformation, disinformation, betrayal, and fear as part of our media communications? So I would say, from a human factors and supply side, let's figure out, first of all, how we restore inner peace. Prem Rawat's work with peace education program, have people experience this love and this clarity that you provide about how we look at root causes
Mhm.
before we get to the measures and the impact side,
Mhm.
which always has to come. But I think to start, peace begins with each of us. You are a great peace builder and community builder. And I don't want the ego part to get back to any of us, but I think it's how do we serve if we aren't grounded in our own awareness of how we learn, how we share, and what it is we want out of life.
Mhm. Mhm.
So yeah,
Yeah.
this greatness of the group is a force multiplier for the vision and the conundrums that you nicely articulated over the last hour.
Oh, thank you
Thank you.
for all those kind words, but we're going to get to the next issue here about the solutions, because in the end of the day, just acknowledging the problems doesn't get us anywhere unless we are able to influence that something be done that's going to change the outcomes. But let's hear from
Yeah.
Eugen first. Oh,
Yeah. Maybe I'll add one more thing. I put a model from Richard Barrett for levels of. He has a 7 levels of conscious leadership taxonomy,
mhm.
and the first 3 levels address Maslow's hierarchy.
Yeah.
So, so it starts with we can't become conscious or even have time for this call if we don't feel safe, if
Yeah.
we're hungry, if we're distracted with the other life things that everybody has, right? So, I encourage all of us to think about um, as our route for preparing to learn, are we psychologically and physically safe to be able to, like you identified, or are we, and in complex polytrauma recovery, people only have an attention span of less than 2 minutes. So how do we listen for an hour
Mhm.
and not get overwhelmed or lost?
Mhm.
And how do we then stay in synchrony as the rest of the time for this meeting, for
Yeah.
example? But
Okay.
appreciate your approach, and I love our little conversation with everyone else here.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Ashok. Eugen, please.
Yeah, my apologies for being late. I just discovered you guys had a time shift and we didn't.
That's what I was worried about. I was mentioning that to the early attendees. I said, "Uh-oh, I hope the time shift wasn't an issue."
Yeah, I just heard something mentioning root causes. As I just mentioned, I wanted to bring one in, a new one, if that's still okay.
Sure.
Otherwise, I would say just go ahead. So, do you want me to get the root
Yes,
cause
yes,
in?
please, please. The idea
Yeah.
in these groups, I talk too much, so I'm very thankful to any of you who can add, because we only learn from others. We don't learn through our own talk.
Okay. Yeah. The matter is, I'm addressing this hugely complex challenge, or the initiative I'm running is doing that. We have identified a whole range of root causes, actually a manageable amount of root causes of the highest damage, but we just didn't figure out how to attract the extremely different target audiences. Yeah. And just this came up that, hey, wait a moment. There are those guys or those individuals who might want to do something where it's possible to do quickly without going into any detail. And there are those who need to go further, who need to have additional uh, knowledge, details, education, and so forth. What it gets to right now is, hey, wait a moment, there's a possibility that we keep the homepage, so to speak, simple, targeted to the people who won't go into details but have an interest in making improvements. So if we give them very, very simple possibilities at hand, like asking leadership questions, which guide decision makers to the effective solutions and create an engagement loop around it. So then it should be possible to get large groups, large number of people active. And while there's an engagement loop, there's also, how shall I say, something that just doesn't dry up right away, but you have a couple of things going around, which then guide the experts to where they can find the solutions. So it needs to be something where the interests of both groups, maybe the parents, the students themselves, you name it, the teachers, those in charge of the school systems have an interest on, hey, wait a moment, here's something that if you merge that, we could get through the system and make a huge improvement. Well,
Yeah.
that's my contribution I wanted to bring in.
Can I add to that, Bill?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, please.
So Eugen, I really love that model because it's dynamic. It's not static and it's not pre-engineered.
Exactly.
Sorry, Bill. Sorry, Bill. It is engineered, but it's engineered with human feedback loops, and then each teachable moment is logically connected by the individual and the experienced facilitator.
Mhm.
So just like this
Yeah.
call. So I wanted to add social ecological model. We I just want to label that. The CDC uses it in public health, but your description of the system goes social and ecological. So it starts with the individual, builds on to the faculty, the school, the community, and the world. And so that inside out or outside in exchange is a multi-level feedback loop, but
Mhm.
it's possible to put that now with cloud IT and AI, you can put those network topologies into strategies for information sharing.
Yeah.
And and some of it can be weaponized, some of it can be crowdsourced in different ways, but I think we have to start to think about how we share nuggets of information or quanta of information in the same thought stream as we have human behavior. And Eugen, I love that idea that each little feedback loop helps. And asynchronous learning is also really a great strategy, like in between meetings.
Mhm. One thing that I think is very important, and Joan, I'm going to come to you in a second, is that we remember we're we're dealing with two very, very different audiences here. We're dealing on the one hand with children who, if their brains are not developed, if they are not given the necessary motor skills, mental maturity, and basic vocabulary, we basically have deprived them. It doesn't make any difference. There's a lot of studies that say that it really you for most of those children, there's nothing you can do after age 5 that's going to reverse their situation. Because if the brain did not hit a certain degree of development, you would have to come back and almost repeat. But the problem is that growth spurt period in the human life development or biological development that took place between age 0 and 3, for example, that spurt's no longer there. You missed it. So when we, on the one hand here, that whatever we do in the school and beyond is too late for a very significant share of the population. And we've got to figure out how we address that. And we do, and we're going to talk about in a minute, we have a very concrete proposal for how we can address that so that we at least give every child that chance that they can, in the further education, whatever we do after age 5, that they got a chance. We have not hindered them in that those early years of development. And as I mentioned here, the percentage of children where that applies in developed countries is skyrocketing. It is skyrocketing here. And so far, we're, with the exception of Finland and I think Estonia also, but I'm not 100% sure, and in China and in fact the Asian countries in general, with the exception of those developments, most of the developed world has not come up with something to address how we're going to close that early childhood brain development and language skill development and so forth, to give them an equal chance as they hit that age 5, where there's a change in the way they interact with society. Yes, Joan. Yeah.
So you can hear me okay?
Yes.
So I'm not a child expert or anything like that, but one of the things that I found was children need, at a very young age, inspiration, to see others that there's a possibility that they can do it. I remember when I first came to Canada, I never heard about hockey before I came to Canada. And I remember someone saying to me, I said, "Oh, how come so many kids are in hockey?" And they said, because every Canadian boy, that was the answer then, 50 years ago, every Canadian boy believes the possibility of being a great hockey player. And I thought, wow, the belief, which then motivates them to be like a Bobby Orr, or to be well, at the time it wasn't Wayne Gretzky, but I'm not into Wayne Gretzky anymore. But the whole inspiration that came from the inside of that person. And then later, when I went to school, all the teachers were either white or Jewish. And most of them were Jewish, actually. And I remember a non-white, because I was the only non-white in the school for 3.5 years before I saw another non-white person, which was my sister, by the way. And I remember the next person, so non-whites started to come into Toronto at that time. So they went from Italians to sort of West Indians, Portuguese, there was a whole flow. And I remember a non-white saying to me, I could never be a teacher. I'd like to be a teacher, but I could never be a teacher. I said, why can't you be a teacher? And he said, because there are no teachers in the school system that look like me. And it was the first time in my life I realized that seeing a reflection of yourself made a difference, because I grew up in a very multicultural situation, so I tended not to see color input until people brought it up. And I was like, oh my goodness, we need to have inspiration. Like Ashok, you were talking about having, coming from a family where you're the first doctor. People need to hear stories like that. Kids need to hear it, because you never know the impact. And I'll tell another story of when I was about 11. I was fascinated with speed. Well, I'm still fascinated with speed in driving. And I loved motorcycles because I was a rebel, and motorcycles meant yeah, you can get away. And I know I'm not a bad chick or anything. Somebody said that to me. I said, no, I'm not a bad chick. I just love the idea that you had this thing and you could, and the school, I don't know for whatever reason, I went to a private school, gave us a film about how motorcycles and speed led to a lot of death and disabilities. And I was like, I made the connection between this careless driving and this rebelness with a bike, motorcycle. I was like, oh, that's the dream. By the way, my first boyfriend had a motorcycle and he died from a motorcycle. But the point I'm trying to make is that we need to have that inner inspiration to motivate the self, is all I'm trying to say.
Yeah. No, actually here, I don't know if you were on the call when I mentioned about the area in Germany where my wife's family lived. That was a rural area where almost no one went on to university. In fact, I don't, they had very few schools. There's a three-tier system in Germany. There's very few schools in that area for children that would go on to becoming anything academic. So that most of the kids, the girls are going to work in a beauty salon or a hairstyling, and the boys are going to be a mechanic. That shows you how many, it's a lot of decades ago when they think that. But the idea to think that I could be a doctor, I could be an architect, or that wasn't there just because they didn't know anybody that had that. Most of them were farmers. Yes, 100%, that idea of showing people what you can be
Yeah,
and getting them to believe they could be that. That's the number one thing.
yeah,
Steve Jobs, the founder of Apple Computer, said here, those who think they can change the world are the ones who do. And we
yeah,
asked a bunch of young people a number of years ago here, why do you think he thought that? And they said, because the ones who think they can are the ones who try. And only the ones who try can succeed. And I thought that was amazing. That was these were like 15 and 16-year-old kids that came to that conclusion. So yeah, 100% right. Now, the thing here when we look, and I mentioned the dropout rate in developing countries, after just the first couple of years in primary school, there's a big dropout rate there. And the reason is those kids feel they are so far behind in the learning and failing so strongly in the learning in the school, they just don't believe they can do it. They can succeed. So why continue if you don't believe you can succeed? So we see this is a major factor, at least I've been told by people there, and maybe Mark Henry or Teresa, you might have some experience with that directly, but the percentage of kids who drop out after just a few years in primary schools in those developing countries is very hard. And Nargis, I think you're in Pakistan, if I'm not mistaken, so you might have experienced similar as well. So, anybody has any comment on that particular point on if you believe you can, you succeed. Oh, and in the United States, when I was traveling around visiting these schools, one of the things that we saw, I saw, was that kids up and through grade four, now this is in the 1980s, so that's this situation, but up and through grade four, most of the kids really respected their teachers, and they really longed for the praise of the teacher. That meant something to them. But they would go home between the fourth and the fifth school year, and they would come back into fifth grade. And these kids were like somebody had done a switch. They just wanted to prove how tough they are. And I'm talking about the kids in these very disadvantaged, troubled schools. And what it was the gangs would get them between the fourth and the fifth grade. They're age 10. Their parents are now letting them out in the streets and whatnot, and the gangs get them. And it's very interesting. The kids who have confidence in their learning and who can picture themselves being successful, they are far less susceptible to the gangs because they see a plan for themselves. It's the kids who feel I'm worthless. I cannot succeed in this world. they are the ones that are most susceptible to the gangs. Yes, again, you want to add something?
Yeah, I'd like to correct something. The information about Germany you gave is a little bit outdated, so to speak. Actually, I belong to the folks from the countryside who started in a low-grade school system, but at the time it was already possible to get through to university. And actually, a cousin of mine got a PhD, came from a farm. We were among the first, I must say. But what I recognize now is I'm very pleased I didn't get to the normal university, but to a University of Applied Sciences. And that is so much better these days. That's where people are still closer to the real world, I'm afraid to say.
Yeah.
And are trained in these things. And by the way, because I have two education, one in mathematics and IIT from the Applied University, and one as a civil servant. And that's also a huge benefit when you in between get 2 years or 3 years into the real world, work with real things,
Yeah.
fixing things, and that turned out to be uh, one of the basics actually to find solutions at the system level instead of just in a box in a discipline and not looking how the whole works. So huge possibilities there.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify. By the way, your path that you're describing, it looks my grandson looks like he's going down that path that you're describing
Yeah.
into the applied higher schools. The example that I was given here that was back in the 1960s and 70s when I got married in the 60s. And at that time, in the rural areas out towards the Bavarian forest, and there, the idea that somebody would go to a university and it just didn't have any examples really local there.
Yeah, and I understand. But I think the school system is now, or the school system is actually even easier these days to get from wherever you come from to the highest level if you want.
It
Yeah.
is, but the thing is, Germany here, the PISA results and those are showing in Germany. There's been also a very dramatic decline and
Yes.
a splitting of the population between those who are doing well in school and those that are not doing well. Partial is due to the migration, heavy migration situation, but I talked to a number of the headmasters.
Yeah, Bill, I don't think we need to spend a lot of time on that matter.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
agree with you on the PISA thing. There are other causes
yeah.
uh,
Oh, no, no, you're
for
100%
that.
right.
So
Anyway,
I would
so yeah,
say
we
let's
won't
go.
go into that detail because I really want to get into the solutions part because that's what we want to focus on here is because we mentioned in the last couple of meetings some concrete solutions. The problem is these solutions are not necessarily new. The teachers' colleges in the United States have been talking about personalized learning, the need for personalized learning, for more than 20 years now. The whole idea is don't be the sage on the stage, be the guide at the side. That's been preached here in our teachers' colleges for a long, long time. So why is it not happening? Why is it that we can go and see that if in entire cities where the schools, the primary schools, have been in the bottom 10% of schools with less than 10% of kids ever achieving grade level, why is it that that situation is unchanged for 10 years or even 20 years or more? Why is it that is anybody trying? How can we hire a principal and not ask the question of, okay, take a look, this school that we're looking to hire you for, we have this disastrous education outcome record that goes along so long. if I'm going to hire you, do you have a plan? Do you think you can fix that? Do you think you can improve that situation? And if not, why would I hire you if you don't, you say you're coming in saying, "No, I don't think I can really change anything or change much." Uh,
So Bill, I wanted to say, sorry to interrupt, but in Canada, the teachers' union would be very offended with that question too. It's all about seniority. So whoever is a senior gets the job of the VP, and it used to be a manager like outside of the school system. Now it's a teacher can become a principal if you can believe it.
yeah, yeah.
You know, like I'm
Here,
I, I'm I'm not putting down teachers. I
yeah,
respect them, but I'm saying that you need a manager or somebody who's a community connector. You know, those sort of skills
yeah,
rather than a defender of just what's being provided in the curriculum
right,
is what I'm saying, and
right.
that has been a
I
problem.
think yeah, in the United States here, our the superintendent of schools and school districts, that's a political thing. You're elected. In fact, the school boards is considered to be the springboard or the starting place for a political career. You start off in the school boards, and then you get to the city council, and so forth and so on. You can move up, but the principals, that tends to be administrators, not necessarily the best educator. It's sort of like in the IT field. For a long time, people used to think, oh, if you're the best programmer, you can become a systems analyst, and really not, because the skill sets are actually very different. A lot of times, the best programmer did not make a good systems analyst.
Yeah,
But
right.
in the education here, it really doesn't make any difference because the school board is hiring the principal. So it's not just a seniority issue here. So the question gets back down to, is anybody asking the question, how do you propose to improve the outcome of the school that we're looking to hire you for? Because for 10, 20 years, this school has just continually failed. And if you don't have a plan or you don't have an idea of how you can fix the situation, wouldn't that be my top priority if I'm hiring somebody to lead a failed school, that they believe that they can turn that school around and they have some idea of how they might go about it? And if that's the case, why is it here that we can take literally hundreds in just one state I'm looking at? We have over 100 schools that have not had any improvement in more than 10 years. So this is primary schools. That's the overwhelming majority of the schools that are in the bottom 10% have never gotten out of the bottom 10%. And so I believe a big part of the problem is because the politicians and everybody that's pointing the finger and say, it's the teaching, it's the teaching. If we had better teaching, we'd get better results. But nobody's going to go out there and say, it's the kids, it's the kids. If we had better kids, if we had better students, we can get better results. But if you ask the teachers off the record, to what degree is the problem the students themselves, that they're literally not capable of learning? Because I go back to that story of that seventh grade teacher that's asked, will you pledge to get your students to be at 100% grade level by the end of the year? And the teacher from that failing school says, it's unfair that you even ask me that question, because the teacher in the successful school district, 90% of their students start the school year grade level ready. 90% of my students are 2, 3, 4 years behind when they start the school year. How do you expect that I can, without having prepared students coming into my class, that I can get them to the next level? So this is the focus on trying to solve the problem through teaching is a big part of the problem. And now we've got, on top of this, you've got the recognition coming out of the World Summit on Education that the UN sponsored a couple of years ago, the idea that knowledge, knowing algebra, knowing history, knowing all these things, is not the primary goal of education. The primary goal of education has to be to prepare people to be lifelong learners. And being a confident, competent lifelong learner is a totally different skill than being an expert in math or chemistry or whatever. So let's talk about we talked about two issues over the last couple of weeks. One issue is how do we prepare this? Well, how do we deal with the situation that students are coming from all different levels of preparation and from all different levels of background support and knowledge of how to learn when they're in K through 12? So what are we going to do about the fact that in a classroom, the students are not all ready to learn the same material at the same speed? And so everybody's saying, yeah, well, we got to have differentiated instruction and so forth. But that works in a that works if you're looking at the highest levels of school. You've got a fairly degree of homogeneity in level of preparation of the students and the aspiration levels and so forth. I have a friend, he was a teacher in a school in Frankfurt, Germany. And he had a problem that in his class, the students spoke 23 different languages. And his question was, what do I do? It's taking a lot of my students. They're spending the whole class trying to understand a few of the sentences that I said. And they're not able to really think about how I'm building the case for what I'm trying to present because they don't understand me at that level. So if we take a look and say, well, even if we take language out of the equation, and in the United States, it's very difficult. I visited a school recently where more than half of the kids don't speak English at home, half the kids in the school. And I know in Germany, this is a big problem as well of a lot of schools where a high percentage of the students don't speak German at home. So the idea came, it's the number one fallacy of the education system is the calendar. The idea that on this date, you are now 1 year and 3 months into your education process since kindergarten. Therefore, you need to be studying this. And next week, this is what you have to learn. And next week after that, this is what you have to learn, ready or not. And the very, very simple concept to say, no, let's make education mastery based. You cannot go on to learning this module until you have demonstrated mastery of all the prerequisite modules. Because what's the value of going and presenting to you materials that you've not mastered the prerequisites for? That seems to me that makes total sense. How can you not think that way? How can you think?
Maybe I could give you another perspective.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'll just use myself as an example. I hated math and science, like hated it with a passion. And yet my teachers used to think that I was an A student. I have no idea why. It's because I spoke well and I had a lot of courtesy. So that's what I attribute it to. But I was really good at history, English lit, and those sorts of subject matter. And what I found was I struggled. And my teachers, I have to give them a lot of credit. They spent a lot of time with me. All my teachers did, I have to say. But I just couldn't get it. But I understood financial planning. and business. So they didn't understand how I didn't understand math, but I did it out of instinct rather than knowledge. So there's a difference, right? But when my teachers would let me go on, so when I needed to understand it, I would go back and that's what it meant. So it was when I needed it that my mind opened up, if that's making sense. So it was backwards. Like, if they had made me think I have to, and I would not have done this, I will tell you, I'm just speaking from my own personal personality. If they had forced me to master something, I would have locked down. But when I
Actually,
when I
here,
realized it, in order to do this, like I made the connection, and I needed to do it. I don't know if I'm making sense. I'm just talking from my own motivation.
no,
So I recognize.
you're making perfect
Okay.
sense because this is a key piece. The former, I think it was the Ministry of Education of New Zealand, where they came out, or somebody in New Zealand did a study on this about the different ways people learn. Some people learn by applying and using the knowledge and then going and saying, why did that work?
Yeah.
And understanding it. Other people, you can just show them a video and they
Yeah.
get it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but that speaks to the need for personalized learning so that people can find the approaches that work best for however they think,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. So the point I was trying to make was I think that you should have a basis of a foundation of, say, for example, math is a good example, because I always make the quote that I'm the most illogical person. So math is logical. So, I'm not going to be, but the thing is, when you learn it, it's actually quite exciting. And so it's your mind that needs to be opened up, right? Like that's what I'm admitting to.
Mhm.
The same as horticulture. I was around gardening for when I was young, and I knew the Indian Hindu names for a lot of vegetables because that's what my grandmother was, the gardener in quotation. And so when I went to school, they had the English names, and then Jamaicans actually called the same thing a different. So when I came to Canada, I was, doing the garden and stuff, and people say, "Oh, I really find it hard to have the names and stuff like that." I said, "I had to learn three different names, right?" But I created fun around learning about the names of garden and how to grow it and stuff like that. I would tell stories rather than information. That's how uh, But I guess what I'm trying to say is that um, I like your idea of this personalized learning, and I think that's what AI is kind of giving us the opportunity to go. But how do you get the school system to incorporate that so people?
Yes. Now, see, that's exactly what we want to talk about today, because, like I say, the teachers' colleges, if we go in and say we need personalized education, and let me just describe one of the methods here. I mentioned Tim Vandenberg, this teacher from California, who is he's a sixth grade math teacher, who almost every one of the students coming in starting the year in his sixth grade failed fifth grade math. And but because you have to fail two subjects or two major subjects to not get promoted. So he ended up with all these students that couldn't do fifth grade math in his sixth grade math class. And he successfully turned those students into one of the best classes for average in the state of California in 1 year. Okay, so the key is he used Khan Academy. And here's the thing, the way he used Khan Academy. Teachers, most teachers, and I think there's like 140 million students around the world now that use Khan Academy. So, but almost all of that is being used wrong. Most of the teachers are going and saying, okay, class, tonight you're going to watch this video and then you're going to do these practice exercises. That's not the way Khan Academy was intended to be used. The plan for Khan Academy was, okay, you come in, you take the test. You start off with the test because maybe you get it. Maybe because this is a continuum of what you were learning in the last one, and maybe that makes common sense that would be the way the next step works. But if you don't understand it, maybe you can ask for some hints, and maybe that's going to help you. That makes sense. But maybe if that's not enough, then you might go and watch a tutorial video. And if that doesn't work, maybe you're going to then go and ask somebody. Okay, but the idea here is that you continue on that one module until you demonstrate mastery, and then you can go on to the next one. So what this teacher, Tim Vandenberg, did is he sent all his students, sixth grade students, back to kindergarten because he says the problem is on you is you all along the way here, maybe you got a 60-70% and they just passed you on to the next one. Or maybe like it with the fifth grade math, you didn't even get that, but because you didn't fail another subject, they sent you on anyway. So we've got to close all those gaps. So you go back to kindergarten, start with 1 + 1 = 2. You take the test. If you know how to do that item, you go on to the next item. And if you know how to do that, you go to the next item. So you're going to do a lot of those at those early ages, and it's all building your confidence because until now, all you've been hearing about all the things you did wrong. And now you're hearing, oh, yep, you're right on that one, you're right on that one, you're right on that one. And you keep building, building, building. Occasionally, you're going to hit one that you don't know. And in that case there, you go and try the hint. And if that doesn't help, you go watch the video. And if that doesn't help, you ask somebody. And then you got it that you eventually have mastered that one. And now you just go on to the next one. And you keep doing that. So you build, and now you're not building on sand, you're building on solid foundation all the way up. So that wherever you've left off, you're at 100%. Now, if you have a lot of absenteeism, like he had in his class, it doesn't make any difference because it's no longer dependent on the teacher's schedule of when he's passing out knowledge. It's the every student picks up wherever they left off. So the each student is working on exactly where they need to be working to master the entire sequence of subject matter, so that by the time the school year ended, he had a very high percentage of his students that have actually surpassed sixth grade, and they've gone on even to higher levels. And the majority have mastered all the sixth grade materials up through sixth grade. And some of them were at fifth grade, but the ones that were at fifth grade now were rock solid in everything up through fifth grade, so that they're ready to now continue to build. So this was the example of his plan, how he can do that and get everybody, and it built the confidence. These kids are now going because all those kids that mastered through the end of sixth grade, they're all at A. They've all mastered about 600 different learning units to get to that point, but they've mastered them. They got it rock solid. And so their confidence level is through the roof. And they're going and saying, I can do anything. I'm really good. Whereas before that, when they came to his class, is I can't do anything. They just sent me here, but I really couldn't even pass fifth grade math. So that's a little bit here of the struggle. But our struggle is how do we get the schools to do that? Because when you think of the success he had, you would think every school around him would copy that. He can't even get his fellow teachers in his own school to copy that. So this is our challenge. How do we get the schools to do that? I'm going to talk about a political problem that you've got. Why are not the state education commissions and others saying, follow this, this works, follow this? Why are we not moving to a mastery-based program? Mark Henry, please. You're muted, Mark Henry.
Can I be heard now?
Yes, we hear you now.
Oh, great. Kind of in a makeshift location because today I was facilitating at the Rotary Leadership Institute, and then I just had to find a quiet place, which is at the pub, but there's this screens in the background. But yeah, A good conversation. Sorry, I joined, I think, an hour late. I think I didn't notice the time zone change. So I found the conversation midway. I wanted to contribute on where I had Joanne going, which is like, how do we get going? Because my reading of the information before the meeting is that we now want to move to the how-to stage, since
Yes.
we've kind of like gotten some form of consensus on where we can go to make the biggest difference to the largest number of the world's multitudes. And I was thinking there could be two approaches. There is the one which Bill has alluded to. That's going to be the very heavily bureaucratic, because you're dealing with legacy systems. If you're going to change an education system that has been around for 100, 200 years now, that's bigger than the Titanic. So your change management is going to be managed very, very differently. And you're going to have tons and tons of resistance just because that's the way human nature is. Now, on the other hand, and looking at it from the Rotary perspective, what maybe Teresa might have contributed if she contributed earlier when I was online, you get to places like Uganda and you're finding that everybody who can afford to be on, to have some form of private education is going for private education. Now, that is private education that's either following the government's curriculum or even those that are following international curricula. And I know that you even have other sex curricula, like I think it's called alternative, what is it, ABC or something. It's a Christian-based education, which
Montessori?
is more, no. Montessori, that is considered as international. So you have the Montessori, you have the Cambridge, you have several different forms.
Mhm.
But when you go to the schools, they'll call them international schools. It's when you go and talk to them and they say, which curriculum are you? And then they'll tell you, oh, it's a Cambridge, or it's a Montessori, or it's this kind of thing. But those are international. Those are for basically
They charter
higher.
schools?
You will have those, yes. So I know it because we contemplated taking our child to one of those, but then they told us you need to have a lot of parental involved engagement, because they need to pass certain levels of competence before they will be promoted. They can't just be promoted. And me and my wife work, so we thought we may not make the time. So I think there's an opportunity for an organization like Rotary, which tends to deal at individual institution level, to say pick a region of interest, pick a number of institutions of interest, and then say, fair enough, we're designing this project, we're going to come, we're going to put in 400, because one of the biggest challenges is going to be where they're going to get laptops or iPads or whatever it is. They're low cost computers, or one could go and look at some of these companies that are getting rid of their old computers. We'll embed those, we'll put the internet, and this is the curricula. And this is, and we deal with the private schools. Now, parents will vote with their, because they're looking after their children's futures. So parents will vote with the results. And I am sure you will not get a problem of saying Rotary is partnering with this school. This is the curriculum we're offering. We're going to be with you, maybe walk the journey for 5 years, and then by that time you'll be sustainable, and there'll be liftoff. Why do I think of that? I think about, for instance, digital payments. You had, I think it was the MasterCard Foundation, or there's an American company, foundation or something like that, which worked in Kenya and started the M-Pesa. M-Pesa is payments using mobile phones. Now, from M-Pesa, you got an equivalent in Uganda. So in Uganda, we would just call it mobile money, but you have it with MTN, with Airtel, and then it's gone to Africa. And now we're here that it is spreading into the developed world. In sub-Saharan Africa, that is basically the mode of payment. So that might be a way of us achieving our objective without fighting a lot of the bureaucracy. Look for the low-hanging fruits where we can actually go in, the way Rotary goes in, the way we go in to rural health centers and we give them equipment. Here we'll be going into schools and we're saying, we're giving you some tools and a methodology and then we can get a VTT team who are going to retrain the teachers, and the parents will vote because listen, they're giving your kid quality, so the parents will vote. The regulation already allows private schooling to come up with whatever they want. It's up to the parents, and the parents are voting with their feet because you take them to the conventional government schools, your kid is not going anywhere, you know. So that could be
Yeah,
starting on the
yeah.
how do we get things going.
It's very interesting because you're mentioning the schools are allowed to do anything. One of the biggest challenges that we've got is in most of the countries, the schools have no say in what they do. Even in the school districts in the United States, the
Mm,
curriculum or the guidance is usually put out by the state level. And
mm,
in a number of countries, and actually it was Uganda was one of them, where we tried to do a literacy program. It was, I think there was 6 countries involved. The only one from Africa was Uganda, and
mm.
um, they had talked to a whole bunch of schools, and the interest level was very high. But when it came the actual time where they kicked it off, and this was done by an Interact group, a group of students that internationally, an international Interact group, and
Yeah.
the time came to kick it off. None of the schools participated, and when they asked, now I don't know if the schools from Uganda were explicitly asked, but the schools in Netherlands, Austria, Ireland, I think was one, and a couple of others. They all said, "Well, but you didn't get the Ministry of Education at the state level, and we in the school are not allowed to do anything unless it is sanctioned by the Ministry of Education." The other thing here is you mentioned about the public schools, the parents. We see the challenge is in most parts of the world is not where the parents have the means to vote with their feet, if you would, and go on, but it's where the parents either because they don't know better or whatever, are sending their kids to the government school or not to school at all. But the challenge really is how do we get those low achieving schools of today to be successful? Because we're talking about how do we reach the hundreds of millions of kids around the world. And so we looked at the US here as the example where we
Mm,
can't go to the state and just get somebody to say, yes, we'll do that. You got to
mm.
go and get a whole bunch of stakeholders. You've got to get the Board of Education. You've got to get the school administrators. You've got to get the teachers. You've got to get all of them on board. And one of the things that
But
we,
that's very bureaucratic, you know.
it
I,
is,
I I
I
think, for
agree.
instance, in Uganda, the most effective way to cut through all that is not even working with the parents, because as you've correctly identified, there are parents who don't even understand the whole concept of education. It's about we're just taking our kids to school, and they're in a conveyor belt. But the alumni associations would be the entry point because the alumni, so like us, when I look at the alumni of my primary school, we've not many of us have sent our kids to the school because it's deteriorated. But you will have parents there. You will have across generations because you're looking at people who've been there from 40 years ago to maybe 15 years ago. So some of them have children of that age, and so like in our generation, we're really looking at giving back. So you have people who are placed in different parts of government at levels of ministries, ministers, through to permanent secretary. So all the bureaucracy can be sorted out even within the alumni association. So the ability to effect change in our kind of setup is very, very different. And I would think if we really want something, if we want to have low-hanging fruits, if we want to first demonstrate success before scale, then we can't go to a model like the Netherlands or the US. These are very well established educational systems. They worked very well in their time. And so changing them is going to be extremely different. It's going to be extremely difficult. Just like changing from your gasoline car to an electric vehicle. You know, this thing has worked well. So,
Let me bring something
Bill,
else that
I
yeah.
just want to say one thing quickly. I agree. If what we're doing is to go to the bureaucratic process, that's going to take 200 years. It's unfortunately, I mean, I'm exaggerating, but what one of the things that when you're introducing a new concept is to have something that can demonstrate and prove what your point is, because the question is, how do you know it's going to work? How does it work? So collecting either success stories, having a pilot project that proves and works with what identifying the challenge or the need and saying this was our solution and this is how it's worked and this is what we've learned, so that it's more of an evolving system, that not saying that we know the answer, but that we feel that this is where society is going and this is how we're solving the problem, but then ask all of those people who have a stake, if you want to use that word, in the system to then come on board and advise, because that's how they get involved as well. So it's because right now school is like school, this building and the teachers and the system, but really school should be about all of the components that affects a student's life, like the community, the family, the schools, and so that if there's one weak link, that it's picked up by the other components. It's not going to be a perfect system because there's no such thing, but we can at least try to address the need and demonstrate it for being able to answer the questions of resistance.
Yeah, in a minute, I'm gonna present because we spent a lot of time looking at how we can get around that resistance factor here, but still get to the masses. The goal here is not how. I think it's very easy to imagine how we can go to an individual school, any individual school. I believe I could go pretty much to any individual school and turn that school around and make that school successful. But that's not accomplishing our goal. Our goal is to close the societal education gap, and that's a very different challenge. But let's hear from Eugen first. Eugen.
Yeah, very, very quick. One of the experiences with this level of bureaucracy, complexity around is that, or actually is a root cause, any partial solutions is going to get stuck, no matter how hard the facts, no matter how good things are. But if it is combined, if you have a couple of very good examples which are there, and on the other hand, group pressure is created through what I mentioned earlier, then I see possibilities to really get through the system. And listening to Mark, it's pretty obvious that in the Western countries, we'll need to have a different approach than in the other countries.
Yeah, I think here the key is going to be schools are very risk adverse. Educators are very risk adverse. This is the way it's worked for hundreds of years, and
Don't
so they're
don't worry about that. When the group pressure is built up from
no,
the
no, that's what I'm
outside,
agreeing.
that's the key.
Yeah, I'm agreeing 100% with you. That's the way that has to happen. It has to be the group pressure that instead of you having to defend why you want to make a change, to create a situation where people have to defend why they're not going with the change because the change is proven successful. So we have to change that dynamic so that it becomes a risk, a greater risk to not make the change than the risk of making the change. So, but I want to jump back to let's look at the other side here because we've been talking right now about the schools at the K through 12. Oh, politically, I promised I'd mention there's a major political problem of switching to mastery based. If you switch to right now, kids go into school at kindergarten, and then after a year they go to first grade, and after another year they go to second grade, and so forth. The overwhelming majority of the kids go year by year into that thing, whether they have that level of knowledge or not. That's why we end up with a case with 40% of fourth graders in the United States not being able to read effectively. But if we were to go and switch to a mastery-based system, that 4 year gap, that the kids that start off 2 years behind normal and the kids that are starting off 2 years above normal, when they enter the school system, that gap is going to become immediately visible. So in other words, now we're going to have kids that would be at the third grade level that are still in first grade because they're compensating for the early childhood education they lacked. And some kids that would be in third grade are going to be in fifth. So now you've got these two age groups. They're the same age, and some are in first grade and some are in fifth grade. And politically, that would be a catastrophic situation to be able to make that visible. So our current calendar-based system, to a big degree, is intended to hide the discrepancies that we have between kids that are better prepared from the higher socioeconomic backgrounds and kids that are not. So the current school system masks that, hides that. So this is a reason. But let's focus first then on saying what could we do to accelerate the closing of the readiness gap between age 0 and age 5? Okay, because that would have the single biggest impact on closing the overall education gap is if all students began school at the same level. Because as we've already said, it's not the money and it's not the teachers, at least in developed countries, that are the primary problem. The primary problem is the home situation that results in a very different readiness situation. And then, of course, the support, the home situation support that's taking place during those primary school years. But let's go and look and say, okay, how can we solve it? Now, I mentioned Finland went and said, fine, we're going to take all the kids 6 to 9 months of age. You're going to be able to go to preschool, and the preschool is through play. We are going to give you the same experience that the kids of the best parents who can afford every kind of a enrichment program and whatnot for their children. We're going to give all kids that capability. Well, Finland could do it because the percentage of really impoverished kids is low. And the amount of the gap between the impoverished and the upper class is far less than, for example, in the United States. So if you tried to do that in the United States, you would have to increase the school budgets by up to 40 to 60%. And because we're talking about having 3 to 4 students per teacher, whereas in the upper grades, once you get to formal school, we have 25, let's say an average of 25 students per teacher. So the cost right now, most communities, most middle-class communities in the United States, 80% of the property tax, which is the biggest tax at the communal level, 80% goes to education. So now imagine here, we're going to take your taxes and we're going to say, we're going to increase your taxes by 50%. No way, it is politically not viable. So the idea that we're going to go and give you replacement parents, because that's really what they were doing, is going and saying for all those parents who are unwilling or unable to provide all that early childhood support, we have to compensate for that. We have to somehow compensate. The idea that we can do that with human teachers is not viable because we're not talking, again, keep in mind also, we fund education locally. So we can't go to a city that can't even afford to hire policemen and go and say, now you got to go and you got to pay all this additional money here. First of all, because most of their money is coming from the state because they just don't have enough property value to generate enough money to pay for local teachers. They're not going to go and increase their school budget by 50%. So what we looked at is we looked at technology. And looking here in the United States, we have this whole companion thing among kids, which, by the way, more than 70% of teens in the United States have tried the companion programs now, and more than 50% are regular users of the AI companions. But forgetting that as a penetration, the idea that we would be able to use interactive AI as a Ersatzeltern or I don't want to call it, let's call it assistant parents or parent assistants to be able to provide the serve and return. That's what they call it, where a kid points to something and goes, and the adult says, oh, that's a ball. That's a red ball. And look, it will roll. And all of that back and forth all day long that those kids don't get. And like I say, the studies show up to 30 million fewer words by age 3. And so that would totally compensate the whole idea of telling stories, but it's play. It's not, this AI is not sitting there and saying, I'm now your instructor in the front. I'm going to instruct you on all this stuff. It's just playing back or playing in a way that is pedagogically designed to build your self-control, to build your mental maturity, your motor skills, your and your verbal vocabulary. An AI that would see you. Let's imagine for a moment it's in every room of your house, you got a little screen on the wall, and there's an avatar on there that sees everything that the children are doing in the room, hears everything that's being said in the room, can emotionally connect with those kids with facial expressions, with gestures, and so forth. And do it in a way so that it knows it's trying to build on everything it ever said to these children or interacted with the children, to build on that so that by the time that child is 5 years old, that child has all of the general knowledge about the world and the way the world works, and the verbal vocabulary of children who have had the best preschools and parental support throughout their early life years. So if we could do that here, that would be fantastic. And it's coming. We know it's coming. We know people are working on the AI nanny devices. But so what could we do? We know that's coming, but it could be a year, 2 years out. And it's probably here. I've done a lot of back and forth research. It's coming first with just the audio devices. We know the smart home devices, Alexa and the Google Assistant here, that is getting to be very widespread deployed. It's probably going to start there with just hearing what's going on in the room, then maybe adding the camera aspect so it sees what's going on in the room and connecting that. And so it can read the emotions of the kids. It can convey emotions. It can and it can build all of that serve and return communication, telling it stories, asking the kids, what do you think's going to happen next in the story? Oh, hey kids, why don't we build a story? Come on, how do you want to build that story? There's so much that can be done in that. So there are probably more than 100 companies just in the US alone that are working on such tools, such AI nannies. And again, keep in mind, there's because the reaction, you tell this to people that are in the middle class, upper middle class, they say, how horrible, why do you want to turn our babies over to robots to teach them? This is horrendous. But we're talking about parents that do nothing with their kids, or worse, just stick them in a closet. So the question is, for those parents, if we could provide them at almost zero cost during the early childhood years, if there's an early childhood in the child in the family with such tools, that the all of the evaluations that I've asked if that could be done, what would the results be? And they all come back saying the impact on education would be, it would totally transform the education system. We would have almost zero education gap at the beginning. And then, like the teachers that we played at Mind Game, when we asked if we could provide you with 100% of your students being grade level ready, would you be able to then pledge to get them to the next grade level in a year? And almost every teacher, we believe, would answer yes to that. But that we don't have today, but if we could get to this. So how can we accelerate the development of such tools and the deployment of such tools? Are any of you familiar with the X Prizes? Peter Diamandis and the X Prizes? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So, Jerica, do you want to explain what the X Prizes are?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes. From my understanding of the X Prizes, from what I've seen over the last couple of years, it's for those who create new benchmarks, science, development, global business markets, things of that nature. It's you have to go above and beyond exponentially with either your idea, your product, and Peter Diamandis awards you for that. And there's different levels of the award as well, aren't there, Bill? Doesn't he have youth sector as well?
No, that you might be confusing that with Google X. The X Prizes is that what he does is he gets sponsors that will offer up huge prizes, usually 15, 20, 25 million dollar prizes to the first party that can achieve some result. So, for example, in Africa, he had I think it was a $15 million prize for the first team that could come up with an app that would run on an Android device that would enable any totally illiterate child to become fully literate in 18 months, just using this app, an Android app. And I think they tested it in Tanzania. I don't know, I haven't followed what came with that one, but he had that one. He had another one for the first civilian organization that would put a satellite in space. They offer all these huge prizes, and it's based on looking at Lindbergh. He uses Lindbergh as the example. Lindbergh was the first person to fly solo across the Atlantic. But a lot of people don't realize that was a competition. Somebody offered a huge prize, and the reason he flew across the Atlantic was to win this prize. And there are studies that show that offering huge prizes like this increases the amount of investment that goes into seeking the solution by up to 40 times. 40 times more money goes into finding solutions that can win huge prizes. So the idea here is we are contemplating approaching Peter Diamandis with the idea of offering a prize for the first one who can come up with a educational nanny, early childhood education nanny, because there's plenty of work. A lot of the ones that are being worked on are being worked on for the K through 12 experience. In other words, it's almost like the tutor explained to you what's going on in the education. But this one explicitly that would be able to observe what's going on in the household or in a daycare, and uh, just constantly communicate with the child intelligently in a way that would build that mental maturity and verbal vocabulary and general knowledge of how things work in the world, so that when those children learn to read, when they hit that fourth grade where we switch from learning to read to reading to learn, they have the vocabulary that they're just able to continue on. There's no third grade cliff that like we experience today. So that is the X Prize, the idea, and we are thinking about some candidates that might be willing to kick in on the prize, and that we could then perhaps compress. So instead of 2 years or so before we would have such a solution being introduced and then not having a lot of publicity, so that the selling of it would necessarily maybe not be that fast, to be able to have something that would actually be available within 6 months, say, maybe by the start of the next school year, although school years don't make any difference for 1-year-olds. But the to accelerate the speed, and we're not talking just about developing, but bringing to market. And bringing to market something like that for a price of, let's say, between $50 and $100. Ideally, a solution that would include a low-cost screen with camera and microphone, and so it can see and hear everything taking place around it, and an avatar, an interactive avatar, so that it would display emotions and it would understand emotions going on in the room. So that's the thought on this, because if we had that available, let's say for between $50 and $100, working solution, that we're talking about a price, because we're looking at this over 5 years, you're looking at something like about $2 to $2.50 a month in cost. And that could be easily, Rotary clubs could go into communities and say, I'm going to go into every daycare center in our community, and we're going to put these devices in every daycare center. And we're going to turn around, put these devices into every home, disadvantaged home in our community. And basically, because our communities are segregated, that means almost every household with children in our community, we would try to put one of these devices in. So that's a thought here.
And
That,
Bill, I've got a question for you. Well, for the group, is everyone familiar with our Dare to Be Great competition?
oh, I don't know.
Maybe you could just kind of a brief over that, because that might be
Okay.
something that we could kind of, reformat to put this toward, adults, of course, the clubs,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, the Dare to Be Great competition is we challenge schools to put teams together to see what school can come up with the most outrageously audacious solution idea to a major world problem. So the idea is that we get the schools to figure out what would be the greatest impact, and then come up with a plan, and come up with a plan of how they would implement it, the whole thing. And then they have to package that in a 5-minute presentation. And we take 8 schools, they get 5 minutes to present, and then there's a few minutes where the judges can ask them questions, uh, uh, and uh, and then there's voting to see which team it's felt that their solution and their implementation plan is the most likely to be successful or impactful. And then the winners of each of those go on to the next higher level of 8 winners at the lowest level. And then the winners of that go on to the next level up. We did a pilot on this just in the year before COVID hit. And the winners of that were so impressive that the World Summit of Nobel Peace Prize winners invited the students from the winning team to go to their World Summit, which in that year was held in Merida, Mexico, and do a workshop on how to mobilize the world. Now, our competition, there's another one, there's the Hult Prizes, for example, which is very popular in Africa. And they offer $1 million in prize money to the winning team. They focus on university. And but it's the same thing. The students put together their idea for a social entrepreneurship, and then there's voting, and the best team goes to the next level, to the next level, to the next level, and the top team wins $1 million. We did not include money awards in our pilot, but the current concept does call. We'd like to be able to offer $1 million in prizes to high schools, but our goal is a little different. Our goal is not to find the best idea. Our goal is to maximize engagement, maximize the number of people who are trying to find a great idea, and building their confidence in their ability to do this. We ran a pilot project with Interact students, where actually that was the thing that led to the competition idea, where there was a conference with a couple of hundred Interact students from, I think, 20 something schools. And we just asked them, whoever was at your table, each table competed to see, come up with the best idea for ending world hunger. And it was interesting to see, because initially they all looked at each other and say, we can't solve a problem like that. We don't know anything about that. But as soon as one person tossed an idea out on a table, then you saw the discussion started. By the end of the afternoon, boy, they were cooking away. And the feedback that we got, that was one of the best events they ever attended, and they want to go and do it more. That led to the overall competition. So anyway, that's the background of the competition idea. But Peter Diamante's idea goes a lot to commercial enterprises. It goes to everybody. It goes to commercial. I think here the education global education prize that they did, that included both amateur groups and professional companies, all competing to see who can come up with the best solution, and it resulted in huge amounts of money being invested. I think I think that 40 times that I mentioned, I think what it was is it results in investments that are 40 times the prize money. So that just that's huge and could accelerate that. So can you picture here the impact if we were able to have a low cost solution like that, and we could go into a city, or a Rotary Club could go in and say, fine, we're going to outfit all of our low income households that have children with these devices. And within a couple of years, the ability to show the impact that it has in closing the readiness gap. And if I think of countries like developing countries where many languages are spoken, but in the schools, they have only a national school language. How do you get those kids so that they have the verbal vocabulary in the school language? And these AI devices can be interacting with the kids initially in their mother tongue, but with the goal that they are converting them over so they grow up totally bilingual. So when they hit school age, they're already 100% fluent and at home in the school language, with the vocabulary that they're going to need when they switch from learning to read into reading to learn. Comments, please. Okay. Nobody?
Right. Maybe one. I'm a little bit getting a little bit concerned. This is going a certain direction, but at the end of the day, to me, only one thing matters. Get it to a level where it becomes executable at the system level.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of time spent on what's there, but I wonder whether we could spend time on the real system level things. That are the hard ones.
The question is here on the system level, when we talk about that, and we know we have to get those kids to that mental maturity and verbal vocabulary level
Yeah,
that
that's all. That's all said. We have spoken
yeah.
a lot about this, so we don't need to repeat that.
So when we
But
look at the alternatives, though,
yeah, what at the end of the day, and I'm sorry I keep hammering on that because all the systems, all the approaches that didn't do this, pretty much got stuck in the system. So what exactly can we do? Or first of all, we should have the root causes that were discussed earlier or before readily available, should identify the solvable root causes that might hide behind them, and from those, create an overall solution framework. Not going into details, ideally, the solution framework fits on one page, post-its format. Yeah. So that in our minds, we can get together. Hey, wait a moment. We have now a good understanding of the big obstacles and root causes standing in the way. And for each of them, we have a solution that we will make part of the overall approach.
keep in mind what I talked about with the finger pointing here, with the educators saying, hey, politicians, you fix the social problems, eliminate the poverty, eliminate the inequality,
Yeah.
and then we can fix education. And the politicians saying, educators, you fix the education system, and that will solve the poverty problem.
This is exactly the kind of things that can be could be identified as a root cause, but it's not a solvable root cause. So the trick is here, and that's something missing in project management and pretty much everywhere, I'm afraid of, to go beyond that and ask, hey, what is the solvable root cause? Or what are the solvable root causes of the highest damage behind this one? And then we can get then to a manageable amount. In one case, that's to a highly complex system. We had only 6 root causes and 42 issues. That was sufficient to find the needed solution. Yeah, it can be as simple as that. It may be a little bit more involved here, but still a manageable amount.
The interesting thing is, because we originally started looking when we did the research, and I mentioned the Quaker, they have this very large project that was taking place in Trenton, the capital of New Jersey, which has the highest poverty rate in the state. And their goal was the holistic approach. If we fix the family, that will solve that other problem. Well, it didn't, because fixing the family did not give the family the necessary tools to be able to provide their children with that. They can provide them emotional love, but they could not provide them with the language skills because they didn't have those themselves. And so to say, oh, we're gonna educate all of those that have less than a bachelor's degree level of education. We're going to raise their education level to the equivalent of having very successfully mastered K through 12. That would have necessarily been the alternative. So we said, what are the alternative ways that we could intervene and educate a level? Because you don't have to educate if the teachers are saying, give me students who are prepared to be successful, and I will make sure they are successful. You only have to educate one grade then, because then they'll all be at grade level every subsequent grade. So that applies also for K through 5, that we get them to where they're coming into the school all ready to be successful. And so we're only looking here that how do we do that? How do we go and get all the children who are going into school, because New Jersey, for example, the Supreme Court passed this thing requiring all districts with a lot of these failed schools to implement a mandatory preschool, 1 to 2 years, called the Abbott schools. But they take an approach, because the kids are now 3 or 4 years old, of teaching them to try to catch up for all the stuff they missed in those first 2 to 3 years. So they take almost like a teaching approach. When they enter kindergarten, by the things that they measure students are for kindergarten readiness, they came out equal. Those kids came out saying, hey, they're equally prepared. But in the fourth grade, they fell off the cliff. Why? Because that kind of intervention starting at grade 3 or 4, or not grade 3 or 4, but age 3 or 4, could not compensate for the loss in those first 3 years here. So what we're seeing here is that we've got a ton of intervention approaches, but they've not succeeded. So they can't be copied because they didn't even succeed
Yeah,
in the pilot.
I understand that. This again, I would be back into what are the highest impact interventions we need?
Yep.
Can we get representatives of the groups involved together? So each of those groups listens to the other ones. Yeah, that's absolutely key.
Yeah.
Then
You're
here in the Netherlands, countrywide project,
Yeah.
stuck in endless discussions until a facilitator came in and did exactly that.
Yeah.
Just a few workshops later, it was
Bill,
highly effective.
Bill, is it possible for Jürgen to do a presentation of his system for us to go through some of these questions and answers? Is that possible?
Oh, absolutely. Eugen would.
Okay, I'm volunteering you, but
Well, I can show you in a couple of minutes, actually. It's 2 pages animated, how such an approach differs from today. If you want, I can do it right away.
Can I just quickly, because what we were talking about for the K-12 solution, to sell the idea of mastery-based education, the concept for that we were looking at is putting together a advocacy group of media, of the major TV channels, major newspapers, who all have education editors, on the one hand, and have them go and working with the teachers' unions to say, because the teachers' unions get very upset when somebody from the outside comes in and says, here's how you can do your job better.
That must be prevented. That's exactly why they should be together.
So our approach to that is we are encouraging the putting together of an education planning team of fourth grade teachers from failing schools, for them to say what they could do that would work, that is not dependent on anybody outside of them doing anything.
Yeah. Okay, there are different levels to this. Yeah. So what you have just addressed is already, I would say, a sub element of it. The key to any systemic approach is to understand first the solution at the system level. Yeah, it doesn't need to tell in detail what approach, teaching approach, so should be used. It just needs to be, it just needs to position the highest impact, again, root causes, solvable root causes, and solutions thereof. And that then one group, which shouldn't be hundreds or 1,000 people, but ideally, the perfect thing would be a single sort of workshop with just 12 people, and maybe too optimistic, but maybe 2 or 3 such workshops with representatives of the groups involved, and then we can make them listening to each other and really focus on what are the highest impact root causes, what are the highest impact solutions that are there. Once they are in place, once they are identified and agreed on, then a whole bunch of issues, obstacles, rejections is bound to go away. And then one can go into the more detailed level, where teachers, for example, can select teachers and other groups involved, then do something similar and identify, for example, the teaching approach that they want to get into their schools.
Yeah, but the key thing here is we have to say when you're looking at the outcome solutions, you can't say what teaching approach because maybe the best approach is get rid of teachers.
That's one of the obstacles that should be on the table. Yeah. So it's quite often, it's really surprising if one goes beyond these things and asks what are the changeable root causes behind such situations. It can be, it's quite often really surprising what comes forward. There are solutions through which, well, I can't guarantee it, but so far it has been tremendously often possible to find solutions that are interesting for the groups involved.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it starts getting them listening to each other. Yeah, and once they realize, hey, wait a moment, he is listening to us, a completely different situation emerges.
Mm-hmm. Again, you know, we have a couple of surveys. One was aimed at teachers, asking them what is the teachers in failed schools, asking them what are the direct causes of their not being able to achieve the highest level of educational output. And it gets down to things like a lack of steady attendance. In other words, students who do not come to school regularly. That is one of the number one things that they're saying. Actually, the number one thing is students who do not have the prerequisite knowledge to be able to succeed in their class. So we asked them, okay, what are the major direct causes, not indirect causes, major direct causes of you're not being able to get 100% of your students to be at 100% grade level by the end of the year. And then we ask, okay, giving those causes, what is your solution? What is your recommended solution for being successful despite those things that are outside your control? You can't control whether the kids come to school on a regular basis. So you have to come up with a solution that will work equally well for kids who do not come to school on a regular basis.
Now I'm hearing pointing the finger. Sorry, I'll be direct here. I'm hearing the technique of pointing the finger to you guys need to find the solutions. No, it's a team. The team needs to
No, the team can be everybody, whatever goes on the team has to find a solution. We just did that with the fourth grade teachers because we said society does not care and does not want the problem solved. There are surveys that show us, both in Germany and in the United States, that the parents in the lower socioeconomic categories in these countries are not willing to do anything to help their children get a better education. There's a case.
There you have a root cause. Now,
no, that's an indirect root cause. Then let's just go here and get rid of the parents. Take the children away from the parents. Maybe that's the answer.
And then we can ask, hey, what solutions might be there? Yeah.
Yeah.
Look at the practical example. Years back, the phone industry was trying to reinvent the phone step by step. They asked questions of what can we do? Yeah. And then a certain guy came called Steve Jobs, and he ignored that. So what he did, he actually asked, what do the people really want from the phone, even when they don't know it? Yeah, he went way beyond the usual approach. So he didn't just listen to them, but he was thinking, hey, wait a moment. Is there something else that may be more interesting? How can I create something really complete that is damn interesting for anybody having a phone now? Yeah. And these are the kind of questions that are tricky, and there's a certain experience needed to get to that level so one can find it.
Mhm.
And I'm getting back to what I just said. Um, if the discussion is changed somewhat from listening what people have, and then driving them, hey, wait a minute, what could be the solvable root causes behind this situation? What could be the desired future situation that we want? And then we can ask what solutions are there. Yeah.
Right.
And solutions can then come on the table. And one of the challenges is right now, these are hard for people who are trained in the exact thinking. That's the vast majority now. No? So there need to be people who can think out of the box uh, beyond the boxes and seek solutions, find solutions across systems,
Right.
across
I know
disciplines.
you
And
and I
then it's
agree.
possible.
Yeah, you and I think, agree very, very strongly on the idea that we need to get the stakeholders to come up with the solution and to recommend it.
Yeah, they on their own won't. They just won't. They need to have facilitation.
Yeah.
And here is a trick that I experienced to work really well. First of all, ask them what they think are the obstacles. Then, when this is somewhat exhausted, or just the highest impact, the most damaging obstacles or root causes, and that is exhausted, one can bring in external root causes and so forth, but needs to ask, is this relevant for this challenge?
Yes.
If they say yes, it's on the table. If they say no, it cannot be used.
Right. But here's where we run into the issue. When we start off to do that, we need to start off with the closest to the problem. The problem is the student. Okay. The problem is the learning outcome of the student. So the first closest thing to that are the teachers. The next closest thing to that is maybe the school administration or system. The next closest thing to that is the parents and the society. So as we work our way out and we see, okay, we want to find perhaps uh, solve all the world's problems because we're saying, look, it's poverty that's causing the parents to not be
No,
to
no, we would go into that
right.
into that
So
level.
I'm just saying it depends on how far we want to go. And where
Now
I'm
it's
getting to is that the problem here is when we go and say, okay, teacher, you have the mission. You've accepted the mission to help these students acquire this degree of education. Okay. The When we go beyond that, the parents have not accepted, they were given the mission, but they've not accepted the mission that they're responsible for their own children. And so if that is the case, if you can't get the parents to show up, and in New York City, any student is authorized to request to go into a magnet school, and there's studies that show that parents of lower socioeconomic categories do not even show up to ask something be done for their children. And it's understandable why they're working three jobs in some cases. We know that the substance abuse is 10 times higher. We know that the single parent household situation is like 5 times higher among the bottom socioeconomic categories. So there's all these things that are impacting these parents and the fact that they never got an education themselves that limit their ability to do anything. So as the question is, I would agree if we could get, and that's where the Quakers came from with their holistic approach to say we deal with the family. If they could get the family to be interested in participating, to be even a stakeholder, then you could bring them in. But you can't get parent
yeah.
A to come in and say, no, all the
Well,
parents, the B, C, and D guys that are not showing up, all those parents have to change their behavior.
now that won't work. So The other aspect with what I'm proposing is we don't have to have many parents on board. We need, in such an effort, it's only necessary to have people there, one or two from each group involved or impacted, who understand those groups. Yeah, so they can bring in things on the behalf of the groups they represent. Yeah,
One
that
thing
makes it
we,
relatively simple.
yeah,
Yeah. Otherwise, it's big. You used to call this monster projects, and
yeah.
when it's called monster project, well, it already communicates this is going to get stuck. Yeah.
One of the things we looked at here with regards to the educators, like I say, they pretty much reject anything coming from outside their own education community. So one of the things we said is we need to have the educators come up to the solution. When we talk to educators, they're pretty much 100% in agreement with the solutions that are already known, what the Teachers College has been teaching, everything. The individual teachers are all in agreement, but the ones that present it, the NGOs and others that present the solution to the school systems, are not the educators themselves. So this is the reason why what we see, if we can get the education, the teachers' unions to put forward and say, you know, we're sick and tired of all these outsiders telling us how to fix the problem. So therefore, we've studied it ourselves. And here, this is what we can do. Not that, and they have to be sure that it's not something that they are dependent on the outside community doing anything for, because we know that's never worked. So the thing is, they have to be able to put forward a solution. We teachers believe that we can do this and we can solve the problem. If so,
They
you
can,
need to have a
uh,
critical mass of teachers that are saying this is us teachers, so that the other teachers in the schools and the schools administrators say that's our solution now. They're
yeah,
defending their
yeah,
solution.
that's at the end of the day, we're talking about exactly the same.
Yeah,
Once they're part of the solution
yeah.
design, it gets in. Actually, I've experienced it personally when I was in a central position between the headquarters in the US and locations over here in Europe. And what we did is we got key representatives of the locations into our community and into the global decision-making process. So when something came out of the headquarters and people were opposed to this in locations, then we could say, hey, wait a moment, this guy has participated and brought in your needs.
Mhm.
And then usually the opposition was gone. Yeah, it was that easy. So
Yes.
it's a matter of finding the right
Yeah.
buttons, put them
Yeah.
together so that they can strengthen each other.
So our strategy, it was to go out to the educators of those schools, because the one thing here the educators in low achieving schools hate is to say they should follow the example of the educators in the high performing schools, because they say, look, we're doing that already. The thing that's unfair is we don't have the students, the raw material students that the successful schools have. So it's unfair. So what we're looking here is to get teachers from low achieving schools to do what you said here and say these are the direct causes: the students not showing up for school on a regular basis, the students not having the necessary knowledge or even brain power to be successful in what I'm supposed to be teaching them. These are the direct problems. And then for them to say, okay, these are the things that would do that if we went to individual mastery-based learning, so that every student is only building on what they know, and we're not asking anybody to succeed with something they don't have the prerequisites to succeed with. So let them come to that conclusion, because so far all the ones we're talking to have said, yes, that's what's needed, but the system doesn't let me do that. So now the second part of it that we're looking at is to go out. We have in New Jersey 136 schools that are in the bottom 10% that for the most part have never achieved even 10% of students at grade level for the last 10 years. And to run a contest, a competition for students for schools to be able to participate in a pilot to demonstrate that this teacher's approach can work, and offering them incentives if they can win the competition to be one of 10 schools that are allowed in that study, and have the media go and say, okay, here's your chance to become a hero. We're looking at the things that studies have shown are the motivational
Yeah.
factors for school administrators to want to do something.
Bill, when I reflect to the discussion we just had, to me, there are two levels to go about this. One is the level you're talking about, to quite some extent, and the other one is a system level. I think now that should be two parallel tracks, allowing both to go ahead, but tightly connected, so they move into a common direction. And the system level one would be the one that really focuses on what are the most damaging
Right.
things
The
that we need to overcome.
the system level, what we're really talking about is creating a credible, believable demonstration of an alternate system solution. And I think we can get the buy-in of, for example, the state commissioner of education and so forth to say, I support this pilot to demonstrate this teachers, the solution idea of the teachers.
That's to me, that's too detailed already.
No,
Yeah, because
yeah.
yeah, because as soon as we drop into details, the things to overcome become exponential. So
When you say drop in, because when we get to where we actually have to talk to actually get it being done, if our goal, our strategy is to get 10 schools to demonstrate that they
that,
can overcome that deficiency, nobody is going to accept a system idea based on an idea.
no, don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong. We need that part, what he just
Yeah.
said. But at the same time, we know you can have proven something, it works, and it still doesn't get through the system. There are two things
Okay, maybe in the United
connected.
States, the thing is we don't have a system. In other words, every
It's
one of the thousands of school districts makes their total independent decision.
well,
They decide what book, they decide what method, they decide everything
yeah.
on their own. So
Well,
what you can do here is, if you can demonstrate that you can take 10 schools that have never achieved 10% of students at grade level and get them to be among the highest performing schools in the state in 1 year, that it now puts the onus on any other school administration. Why are you still achieving at such a low level? We've got proof that it's possible to take a
well,
school achieving
uh,
at your level and go to a higher level. So we're looking, and that's why we want the media to be co-sponsors of the entire initiative, so that they're shining a big spotlight on this and then turning around and shining a big spotlight on every school that does not follow that approach.
I, I'm sorry, Bill, what you communicate to me in the experiences with the systems, they may not be defined, but they are there. In the last years, in particular last 10 years, I would say, facts, proof doesn't work anymore. It doesn't get through the system anymore. Yeah. Except if it fits some traditional ways of thinking. So really think, um, I really think now there should be two tracks approaching this. Yeah.
Because it's a political thing here, the education system in America is in the end political. And we see right now, we see a lot of families moving with their feet in going to private schools that are using AI. So what we can see here is if we had 10%, 10 schools, which is about 8% of the lowest achieving schools, demonstrate such a high performance that everybody's talking about it. That's our goal. Get everybody talking about how it's now possible to go from A to from 10% to 70% in 1 year. And there's no reason not to do that. The political pressures, we can literally go in there and lobby to unelect every official who does not support their schools making that change. And that's the way it works here. You go in there and you get people kicked out of their job. You go and literally get them kicked out, and that's possible here in the States. You can turn it
Yeah,
on.
okay. And then there come the replacements. Yeah, we have seen this in organizations so many times.
No, we're not
People-
replacing just the individual. We're replacing the system. We're replacing the system because
I'm afraid I still see too many obstacles standing in the way. Still too much, shall I say, partial solutions, and the overall system approach. There are still too many gaps and root causes standing in the way
Yeah.
that would need to be addressed to prevent getting stuck
Yeah,
in the system.
and I don't want to get the impression here that I am disagreeing with you. I literally am wanting that we sort of discuss to explore how do we take these, because if we look, and maybe it's because I've spent so many years now in this specific problem space, that and looking also how not just what the best idea is, but literally how to sell it, how to make it be the standard practice, bringing about the change, the pressures, looking at the combination of political pressures, solution ideas, results, all those different factors, so that you can literally, if you can come out and show you can take a high percentage of schools and get almost 100% of the schools that tried this new approach, which is radically different because the teachers no longer teach, that they're out of the teaching business, and they go to the mentor business, which is something that most of the teachers I talk to prefer anyway. But they're afraid to make that switch based on their own thinking. But if we can demonstrate that, and the parents, we go to the parents that would not be willing to get actively involved to do anything, but ones that would be willing to show up to vote, which in many communities here is like only about 10 to 15% of the population, that those people there are willing to say, hey, why are our kids still failing when the kids in the village next door, the community next door, that we're failing are now succeeding? What's your plan? Why aren't you doing that? Why are we still in that problem? And then lobby and maybe fund the folks that say, if I get elected, I will bring about the same change as the other community. And we have a dictatorial system here. So it's the top can say whatever they want and do within their school district.
Actually, well, you must be 3 hours going on now.
No, it is. But no, I think because this is a good discussion.
I have one last point I'd like to make. I believe I've mentioned before that I'm working now with a number of neurodivergent individuals, often ADHD, autism, and so forth. And what we see there is, okay, there is more interest by organizations now to use their talent, but it's still a painstaking, slow process to get them into the organizations, let alone into the positions they should be to solve problems.
Mhm.
And what I've done now with a team of about 10 people only, here from Europe and the US, Canada, I believe somebody as well, is we have identified the root causes, the most damaging one, solutions available there. And what we could do, and I still need permission, I could show you the work document so we can make it much more practical in how such an approach could lead from root causes to solutions. At the high system level. And by the way, the thing we turned around, instead of going through the system bottom up, the main question is, how can we create demand for the skills of neurodivergent individuals? So the key is getting the organizations, wherever they are, worldwide, to see, hey, wait a moment, this is interesting. I don't want to miss this boat. I want to be on this new trend, that kind of approach. That's the approach. So it's completely different because otherwise, yeah, it's the system. You think you make 3 steps forward and 2 steps back, and that goes on again and again in tremendously small steps until one is out of energy. So I hope we can find, well, we are advanced in identifying, by the way, what needs to be done in order to create demand. Something like this would be possible here as well, I think.
I have a question here because of the whole thing of mental problems and the ADHD. When we look here at typically around middle school, where schools start to say, "Oh, we're seeing all the mental issues among young people," there's a theory out there, hypotheses, that a lot of that is based on the way this current school system causes kids to fail. Either the combination of their prep before they got into school, or the fact that they're in school and they're not able to succeed at the way the school currently works. And the pressures of that cause a lot of the mental problems that these kids have. The second part is with the ADHD is what percentage of that is due to the lack of the early childhood development, the brain development that takes place with those serve and return the children, where the mental maturity aspect is that they're several years behind. So if we could solve these 2 problems, the one problem is making sure that using the assistant parent to provide all that necessary serve and return, equivalent to what the best parents provide their kids, so that the children reaching kindergarten are really totally equal in maturity, mental maturity, and vocabulary and knowledge and so forth, and confidence level and motor skills, all that combination. And then we're able to make sure that by the personalized learning, that all of those children are very confident in their learning, because they're always just building on what they already know. They're never put in a situation where they're asked to learn stuff that they have not mastered the prerequisites for. So that with those
solutions are there. No question about it. Okay, John.
Say something. I think that we need to define what problem we're solving. Because when I listen, there's so many problems, and when you're doing a campaign, the message has to be strong. It has to be, if you say, "Are you doing this or are you doing this?" When you get into that, you're in a murky waters. I'm sorry. You can introduce those things as you get respected and develop credibility, but what is the challenge or need or that we're solving? Is it a new way of education? Because we can make the vision big. What I'm saying is that when you're going out there to the public, politicians do that. They repeat the same blooming thing from one constituent to the other. The reason they do that is because people don't listen. And politicians that try to do too much never get in.
Simple
I
message.
work within that system. I know. And I used to wonder, like, they're full of, you know what, when they used to say the same thing, until I realized that people they're a lot of times just not listening, or they're, I used to call them simpletons, but I won't say that now, even though I've said it. But you have to send a message home that people connect with. And when it's too multi-pronged, people tune out.
Yeah, I
So
think
what
here,
is it that we're
Yeah.
trying to solve?
I think we have a very simple message. The message is closing the education gap, which depends on closing the education readiness gap. But people are going to bring up the mental maturity or mental illness issue in ADHD, which we can say solving those first two problems, the education gap and the readiness gap, go a long way to
Yeah.
reducing the ADHD and mental issues.
Yeah, you see, I think that as a campaign, that's a difficult message to
Yeah, I agree.
get across, because it's too sectorial almost. I
Exactly.
mean, I'm not an expert in education, and it's certainly
Well,
not in
this,
education in the US, but I'm more about learning. So my whole life, it's about learning. And so what I think, though, and I've done hundreds of campaigns I've been involved in, political, environmental, when I worked in the environmental field, and I'll tell you one thing that we used to say, it's a white elitist game, because they were middle class, mostly women, and they just never connected with people. It's always the doom and gloom, and the world is coming to an end, and oh God, we're going to run out of gas, we're going to run all kinds of, like, and it's like people tuned out. But what you wanted to say is more simple messages, and connecting with, like, there was, at the time when I was involved, I was like the only ethnic at the time. Mind you, I live in a white city, so that could contribute. But the thing is that the messaging was always gloom and doom. We're running out of resources. People aren't working. People didn't know what the message was. If they had simply said that we needed to live in more within the natural systems, people, oh, what's that? They would be asking the questions, right? But the one thing that they never gave, that environmentalists never gave, it was they always brought up what the issues were, but never what to do or how to do it.
So what about the participants here doing a little brainstorming on what could be the number one, the most powerful message we could create that gets people on board across the groups involved?
Yes.
We could do that, and that would then form a basis for all the rest.
And then you add to it.
Yeah.
Later. But if we don't have a solid vision and messaging, everything else is just discussion.
Yeah. Yeah, as far as I'm concerned, let's get the action done.
Good.
Offline, but I need to drop off now.
I need to
I have
go
to as well.
Yeah. So what I appreciate here, and the discussion like this, again, your comments are very much appreciated here, because you're causing us to think, and Joan, what you mentioned, you're 100% right. You have to keep the message very simple, and people have to resonate with the message. They have to identify with the message, because otherwise, who cares? It's sort of like what is it? Craig Kielburger from Toronto, who the founder of the We movement. He said that most people here, why don't they get involved in anything? And they say, well, because it's not my problem, it's the problem of those people over there. Or they say, well, what can I do about it? I can't see anything I can do about it. So you have to be able to go and both give people a reason to want to do something, but they also have to see a path by which they believe they can be successful in doing something.
Exactly.
Those two things are what we've got to focus on.
That's right.
maybe
Yogan, you taking notes?
I'm recording here. So maybe the thing here is so these are why these are two projects. The one project is closing the readiness gap. That's the early childhood project, and that's why we're looking to see we need the tool. The tool, we know it's coming, we know it's not there, and we know that the things that are there are not viable because they're not affordable, and they failed time again. We know that. So, but the second one is that mastery based, going to mastery based in education, which we could get quotes from a gazillion professors of education who have been, like I say, teaching that for more than a decade now. But we need to be able to have the proof. So we treat those as two different things and say, how do we make it happen? If we've got companies out there fighting for market share with the AI nannies, that's going to take care of that. We don't have to take care of that if they're out there doing that, and then we can turn around. We just need to promote the fact that it works, but let them fight it out. In the education system again, let's get the ones that are willing to fight to the right to demonstrate how successful that can be in a high profile one that everybody's talking about for a whole year long, talking about here. Wow, look at what this school's achieving. Look what that school's achieving by arranging for the media to be weekly covering the progress that these 10 competing schools are doing to compete, to demonstrate that they can achieve what everybody would say it's not possible when we start. And then be able to go and create a movement after we can prove it, create a movement to remove all the people that are
give them a chance.
No.
That's rather difficult.
We start off to give them a chance. We start off making a program to facilitate, to help them. But
Okay.
for those that, for whatever reason, still are just saying, hey, I'm just waiting for my pension, and I don't want to do anything. We can't have the kids suffering because of that. So, but that's over a period of years. The first thing you have to have is a working model.
Okay, I have to drop off now, I'm afraid. Great discussion.
Thank you, everyone, and Jerica. Maybe we've got some time to talk because I have another meeting this evening where we're going to be talking specifically about how we want to approach Peter Diamandis and how we are contemplating putting that $10 to $20 million prize together.
Yes, absolutely.
Because that's going to get everybody talking and it's going to generate here thousands. There's over 100 robot companies in China now. Why? Because it became a very high rewards opportunity, and so everybody in China is rushing to become a robot company. The same thing here. There's so many AI companies that would recognize just like the Alexa, Amazon Alexa has become extremely popular here. Whoever comes out with that first device that will let children totally close that gap in the education gap is going to make a fortune. They're going to become billionaires, and if they're not already. So, but that is we're going to be looking, but definitely there's been suggestions of what is it, Bezos's X as a candidate, and some other people in the billionaire class that might be interested in funding this.
Okay. Do we have an action now on this message?
Well, the only thing is we're just starting to talk. Tonight I got my first
No,
concrete
but we
meeting.
just between now and the next meeting, everybody of us could think about messages,
Yes.
put them on
No, you know what? I'm going to create that
folder.
folder with a couple of blank documents where we can share ideas on the different aspects.
Good ideas. Just this question.
Great.
When we have that question identified, we have focus on what we want to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
So it's
Okay.
just
What is it that we're doing?
one, two sentences, not more, for such a message. But of course, if you have 5 or 10 possibilities, so that we can select from and fine tune on, would be great.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds good. Sounds good. I'll
Yeah, just
Yeah.
quickly, Bill, for the Rotary meeting, my Rotary meetings, if you
Yeah.
can, it's the third. Bye-bye, Yogan.
Yeah.
It's
Bye,
the
Yogan.
third Mondays of every month.
Cheers.
And every next month, they're going to be talking, there's going to be a presentation about the digital marketplace.
Uh-huh.
So that's something I think you're interested in that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then
yeah.
if you come to that meeting, then you get to introduce yourself, and also then they put you on the list as well. So
Okay. Sounds
just pop in
yes.
and then pop out.
You know, the problem was this last time I just saw it too late and I already had
Yeah.
commitments.
Yeah.
Okay.
So just put it down. It's a third. It doesn't have to be this week, but the third Mondays of every month.
Yep. Gotcha.
Okay.
Yeah, I think third Monday. Yeah, I think I'm not traveling that day. This
I
month,
know
April's a
it's
very busy month. We've got 2 model UNs, one in New York, one in LA. Plus, we're looking to put together a global peace conference in LA also. So
yeah.
it's going to be
Well,
a
they
busy
used to
month.
have it every first Monday and every third Monday, but every first Monday, like there's so many first Mondays in the month that is a Canadian holiday. And these days I'm very fussy about giving up those days. I'm so, I just need to always have something to
Yeah.
relax.
Yeah.
So anyway,
Okay.
I just
Will
thought to let
do.
you know.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye
All right.
now. Bye.
Bye. Thank you, everyone.
Okay.
Bill, I'll give you a ring. Give me a few minutes and I'll give you a call.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Thank
Okay.
you.
Okay. Bye now. Bye, Mark Henry.
I've come in just at the end.
Yes, yes. But you'll be able to watch the recording.
I'm just rejoicing.
I should have the recording out by the end of by tomorrow. I've got to go through a process with it, and because it's so long, it takes a while. But I'll get that posted out there so you can watch what you missed. Put it on a higher speed.
All right. No, that's okay.
And Mark Henry, I really appreciate, I'm so impressed with your comments here, and I definitely hope we can work really together in putting together a example case in Uganda.
Yeah.
Because I remember, what was it? The Minister of Education was the wife of the president for a while, right?
She is. Yes, she
Yeah,
is.
yeah.
She
Oh, she
is,
still
and
is? Oh, yeah,
she
that's
still
right.
is.
Because the other guy.
And I have a lot of people. I mean, if we, for instance, had to partner with the academia,
Yep.
then the dean of engineering at Makerere University, that's a leading university. That's my sister.
Oh,
So
okay.
I've got a lot of connections.
Let's bring an
And then
example that.
I know a good number of schools.
Yep.
Uh, say like in Kampala and in Barara, where I personally know the principals. So if we
If we
had to
can,
engage with school leadership,
yeah,
then I could engage with them and say, listen,
maybe
I'm
put
putting my
together an
credibility behind
advisory.
this.
Maybe we could get an advisory panel in
Yeah.
Uganda and maybe from a couple of other countries of
Yeah.
educators to talk about how
Yeah.
do we close the gap between the schools in sub-Saharan Africa and leading
Yeah.
schools in the rest of the world.
No, let's do that. And you see, the beautiful thing is my presidency is coming to an end in June. It's just a
Uh-huh.
very short period of time. After that, I would want to now transfer my energy. I'm on the board of the Leadership Institute in Uganda, so that's
Oh,
my one half of my
yeah.
volunteering to Rotary. The other half, I would be very keen to put my energy into something like this.
Oh, this would be great.
Instead of just sitting and becoming a backbencher and they say
Yeah.
you're a past president or become an assistant governor, there's not too much value I think I would be
Yeah.
adding for my time. So
Yeah. No, I think here,
if we want to move towards
yeah.
piloting, pulling together think tanks or whatever, I think that for me would give me, I would contribute more for
Mhm.
whatever time I'm putting in Rotary.
Oh, we'd love
I'd
that.
make a
We'd
bigger
love that.
contribution.
Yeah, we'd love that.
Mm.
I got to run, but we will be in touch then.
All right then.
Okay, thanks. Bye now.
Yeah. Goodbye then.